The orange cake sat on the counter like a small sunset someone had murdered and frosted. Darling Abbott, 5'2", built like a fire hydrant wrapped in terry cloth, wearing what could only be described as fucking pumps despite standing in a commercial kitchen for 16 hours, stared at it with the kind of exhaustion that bypasses bone and settles directly into the soul. "Bobby," she hollered toward the dining room. "Bobby, if you're skateboarding through my restaurant again, I will personally demonstrate what these tongs can do to a 9-year-old's enthusiasm." The Abbott family restaurant had occupied the corner of Bleecker and Vine since 1947, back when Darling's grandfather struck oil in what was supposed to be a septic installation and decided to open an eatery instead of retiring to some Bo Derek fantasy in Barbados. The place had the charm of a bathhouse designed by someone who'd only heard baths described secondhand, all chartreuse tile, beige formica, and dark brown paneling that seemed to absorb hope itself. 14 kids. Darling had 14 goddamn kids, which made her either extremely Catholic or extremely bad at learning from experience. Jack, her husband, liked to joke it was both. Jack Abbott was currently elbow-deep in the grease trap out back, his daily penance for being the only person in the family who could stomach the smell without dry heaving. Mom, Maxine, 17 and angry about it, burst through the kitchen doors holding a rosary that had somehow gotten tangled in her skateboard wheels. Judy took my. She stopped, staring at the orange cake. "Is that for Mrs. Henderson's wake?" It was. Darling picked up the tongs, clicked them twice like a gunslinger. "Until your father ordered beige frosting instead of cream." Beige, Maxine. For a funeral cake. We look like we're celebrating her transition into Midwestern hotel carpeting. From somewhere in the dining room came a crash, followed by Bobby's voice. "The pogo stick wasn't I in the Wizard of Oz?" "Side work." Darling screamed toward the front. "All of you. Judy, you're on napkin duty. Bobby, I want those salt shakers filled or I'm donating your marble collection to therapy." Maxine snorted. "You mean that mansion you keep threatening to send us to?" "It's not a mansion, it's a facility, and Dr. Pembroke assures me they have excellent programs for teenage irony." The afternoon shift was always like this, controlled chaos with an undercurrent of something Darling couldn't quite name. Religious abuse, her mother would have called it, this whole restaurant being some kind of penance for sins nobody could remember committing. 14 kids working alongside their parents, nobody quite sure if this was family bonding or child labor, everyone too tired to care. Jack came in through the back, covered in what Darling hoped was just grease. "Traps cleaned." Found what I think was either a really old meatball or Barney's sense of dignity. Barney, the janitor, had worked at Abbotts for 30 years and had the IQ of a flag dancer's pom-pom, but he showed up on time and never complained, which made him more reliable than half of Darling's actual children. "Where's Johnny?" Jack asked, washing his hands in the industrial sink. "Pregnant and napping in the office," Darling said. "Again. I swear that girl's been expecting for 2 years." "That's not how pregnancy works, sweetheart." Tell that to her and her increasingly creative excuses for not doing prep work. Judy, 14 and already developing the kind of withering stare that could curdle milk, appeared with an armful of maxi pads. "Mom, why are these in the supply closet next to the industrial mustard?" "Because Wrath reorganized everything again according to his system," Darling said, making air quotes so aggressive she nearly took out her own eye. Wrath, full name Rathford, named by Darling's mother during what everyone politely referred to as her experimental phase, was child number 7 and had the organizational skills of someone who'd watched one TED Talk about minimalism and decided to make it everyone else's problem. The restaurant was filling up now, the dinner rush beginning its inevitable crawl toward chaos. Darling could see through the kitchen window, families in pantaloons, because apparently that was back in style. God help them all, teenagers who'd probably masturbated to that one scene in some movie and now had to face each other over meatloaf. Regulars who'd been coming since the oil strike days. "Table 6 needs refills," Maxine said, tying on her apron with the enthusiasm of someone preparing for a root canal. "And the guy at the bar keeps asking if we have anything chartreuse." I don't know if he means the color or the liqueur. Both, Darling muttered. Tell him we have neither, but we can make him uncomfortable, which is apparently our specialty. It was 7:30 when things got weird. Judy was carrying a tray of coffee cups. Bobby was finally doing his salt shaker duty, albeit while also trying to ollie off the prep station. Jack had just told a joke about a click clamp to the line cook, who laughed but also looked deeply concerned for Jack's marriage, and Darling was cutting into the orange cake to see if it was salvageable for the wake. The lights flickered. Not the normal flicker of bad wiring in a building older than most Supreme Court justices. This was different, a strobing effect that made everything look like an old film reel, frames dropping out of sequence. Bobby, what did you do? Maxine demanded automatically. Nothing. Bobby's voice was smaller than usual. I didn't. The air in the kitchen began to shimmer. It started near the grease trap, of course it did, because nothing good ever happened near the grease trap, and spread like heat waves over asphalt. Except it wasn't heat. It was something else, something that made Darling's teeth ache and her eyes water. Jack grabbed the tongs, for what purpose, Darling couldn't imagine, and moved in front of the kids. All 14 of them had somehow materialized in the kitchen, drawn by that instinct children have for witnessing things their parents desperately want to protect them from. The shimmer coalesced. And then, because the universe had apparently decided that running a restaurant with 14 kids wasn't challenging enough, a being appeared. It wasn't exactly materialization, more like reality had decided to accommodate something that had always been there but invisible, the way you suddenly notice the ringing in your ears only when someone mentions tinnitus. The being was tall, or short, or both, depending on which angle you looked from. It wore something that might have been robes or might have been the concept of clothing having an anxiety attack. Its face, if it had a face, seemed to flicker between expressions too quickly to track. And it was holding what looked unmistakably like rosary beads. Abbott family, it said, and its voice sounded like wind through an empty building, like the last note of a song you can't quite remember. We've been waiting. Darling, who had given birth 14 times without anesthesia, not by choice, insurance reasons, who had cleaned the restaurant's bathroom after the Great Chili Festival incident of 2019, who had once stared down a health inspector while holding a wooden spoon like a weapon, did what any reasonable person would do. She raised the tongs. We're closed for private events, she said firmly. The being tilted what might have been its head. You misunderstand. We're not here for dinner. Then what? Jack started. The air shimmered again, and suddenly the kitchen wasn't just a kitchen. Images flickered around them like someone was clicking through a cosmic slideshow. The Old West, all dusty streets and wooden storefronts, Stonehenge, massive and mysterious under an ancient sky, the industrial age, all smoke and churning gears, and the kind of progress that came with a body count. Holy shit, Maxine whispered. Language. Darling snapped, even though her own thoughts were significantly more colorful. The being moved closer, or maybe reality moved and the being stayed still, and Darling could see that its robes, if they were robes, had a pattern. Not quite paisley, not quite fractals, something in between that hurt to look at directly. Time, the being said, is not what you think it is. That's the least helpful thing anyone's ever said to me, Darling replied, and I've had 14 children ask me where babies come from. Bobby tugged on her apron. Mom, is this about the pogo stick? Because I can explain. This isn't about the pogo stick. Darling kept her eyes on the being. What do you want? The being's not quite face did something that might have been a smile. Around them, the images continued to flicker, a mansion that existed in multiple centuries simultaneously, a therapy session where the patient and therapist kept switching places, streets that hadn't been built yet and buildings that had been demolished decades ago. We want, the being said slowly, as if tasting each word, to offer you a choice. I've already got 14 of those, Jack muttered, gesturing at their children. Not children. Destinations. The being spread its appendages, arms, tentacles, suggestions of limbs, and the flickering images sharpened. Points in time. Moments where small changes ripple forward, where the thread of now connects to the thread of then, where. Are you saying you can time travel? Judy interrupted, her 14-year-old skepticism cutting through the cosmic mystery like a hot knife through beige frosting. Not travel. Witness. Participate. Alter, perhaps, if the moment allows. The being's rosary beads clicked together, a sound that seemed to echo from both everywhere and nowhere. But there are rules. Costs. Balances to maintain. Maxine's hand found Darling's arm. Mom, this is insane. It was. Completely, utterly, triumphantly insane. Darling looked at her family, all 16 of them, if you counted Jack and herself, crammed into a kitchen that smelled like grease trap and orange cake, standing in a restaurant built on oil money and stubbornness, facing down something that shouldn't exist, but absolutely did. The being waited, patient as stone as time itself. And in that moment of silence, Darling Abbott, mother of 14, wife of 1, owner of a restaurant that had survived recessions, health code violations, and that incident with the mange outbreak in the storage room, made a decision. She lowered the tongs. Tell us more, she said. The being's not quite smile widened. And the kitchen, the restaurant, the very air around them began to change in ways that defied description, in ways that suggested this was only the beginning of something vast and strange and possibly wonderful or possibly terrible or possibly, most likely, both at once. Outside, on Bleecker and Vine, the neon sign reading Abbotts flickered in time with the being's movements, casting chartreuse and beige and dark brown shadows across the sidewalk where a skateboard lay abandoned, where the world continued on, oblivious to the fact that inside, 14 kids and their parents had just been offered a chance to step outside of time itself. The orange cake sat forgotten on the counter. And somewhere in the office, Johnny woke from her nap, felt her perpetually pregnant belly, and wondered why the air suddenly tasted like possibility and danger in equal measure. To be continued. End of slips. Chapter 2, The Frog Plague and the Wax Revelation. The being's not-quite fingers extended toward Bobby, the 9-year-old who still had salt crystals on his hands from filling shakers. This one, it said, voice like wind through a steeple. The small one. He comes with us. Darling's response was immediate and involved the tongs being raised like a machete. Absolutely the fuck not. Mom. Bobby's voice cracked. Mom, I don't want to. Language, Jack said weakly, though his own face had gone the color of granite. And also no. No, you can't have our kid. The being tilted its not-quite head, and suddenly there were more of them, 3, 5, a dozen, materializing in the spaces between the industrial refrigerator and the prep station like thoughts becoming solid. They moved with the synchronized precision of flag dancers, except flags didn't typically inspire existential terror. Not take, the primary being corrected. Borrow. Transport. Return, eventually, though time is flexible. How flexible? Maxine demanded, stepping in front of Bobby despite being approximately 40 pounds lighter than her mother's protective fury. He'll return, another being said, this one shorter or perhaps just choosing to appear that way. But when he returns, he may be different. Older. Younger. Carrying knowledge that hasn't been discovered yet or was forgotten centuries ago. Judy pulled out her phone, already trying to live stream. This is insane, I'm documenting. The phone died instantly, along with every electronic device in the building. The lights stayed on somehow, but everything else just stopped. You cannot tell anyone, the beings said in unison, their voices layering like an unholy choir. What happens here, what we offer, what Bobby will witness, it must remain contained. Secret. Hidden like cotton panties in a convent laundry, or the truth about what really happened at that wooded summer retreat where the unfortunate incident in the forest occurred. What forest incident? Jack asked. Exactly, the beings replied. Bobby was crying now, silent tears that broke Darling's heart into approximately 14 pieces, one for each of her children. She thought of Carol Burnett, who'd raised kids while being funny and fierce, who'd survived everything with humor intact. What would Carol do? Probably not face down interdimensional beings in a restaurant, but still. Why him? Darling demanded. Why Bobby? Because, the primary being said, and for a moment its face stabilized into something almost human, almost kind, he's the only one who still believes in magic enough to survive what he'll see, but skeptical enough to question it. The balance required is rare. Bobby looked up at his mother. At 9 years old, he already had Jack's eyes, that peculiar hazel that looked green in spring and brown in fall, and Darling's stubborn chin. Will it hurt? Everything hurts, the being said honestly. But not everything wounds. There was a long moment where the entire Abbott family stood frozen, 14 kids and 2 parents facing down something that shouldn't exist. In the dining room, the coffee in abandoned cups began to ripple, concentric circles spreading outward like someone was rewriting reality one frequency at a time. Finally, Darling lowered the tongs. Not in surrender, but in that terrible acceptance that comes with parenthood, knowing you can't protect them from everything, knowing sometimes you have to let them go into the unknown, knowing it will destroy you, but you do it anyway. You bring him back, she said, voice steady despite everything. You bring my baby back, or I will find a way to hunt you through time itself. I will learn the laws for duels in Texas. I will acquire swords, and yes, I know it's technically legal to carry a sword in the state as long as you're not being threatening, which is a legal gray area I'm prepared to navigate. And I will challenge every single one of you to single combat across every era you exist in. Jack blinked. That was specific. I've been researching, Darling said grimly. After the incident with Wrath and the antique sword collection. Bobby took a shaky breath and stepped forward. I'll go. But I want Southern comfort when I get back. You're 9, Maxine said. Not the drink, the feeling, dumbass, Bobby replied, which earned him a laugh from Judy despite everything. The beings surrounded Bobby, their not quite forms creating a barrier between him and his family. The air began to shimmer again, those images of other times, other places, and then Bobby was gone, vanished like he'd never existed except for the salt shaker he'd been holding, which clattered to the floor, still half full. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the frogs started appearing. Not one frog. Not a few frogs. An infestation of frogs, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, materializing out of the air like some biblical plague reenactment nobody had ordered. They covered every surface, the counters, the floor, the prep station, even climbing up the walls with their sticky little feet. What the actual, Maxine started. A frog landed in her open mouth. She spat it across the room with impressive velocity. Don't kill them, one of the remaining beings warned before vanishing with the others, leaving the Abbotts alone with what had to be every frog in a 100-mile radius. Why are there frogs? Judy shrieked, standing on a chair. Why are there frogs? Jack started laughing, the kind of laughter that comes from a place beyond sanity. Our son just got kidnapped by time demons and you're concerned about frogs? Time demons is a gross oversimplification, Johnny said, appearing in the doorway, heavily pregnant and somehow completely unfazed. And we need to get these into the back before customers see. Too late, Wrath announced, pushing through the kitchen doors. Table 6 just turned into frogs. Everyone froze. I'm sorry, Darling said slowly. Table 6 did what? Turned into frogs. Well, technically they were already frogs, but they were human-shaped frogs eating meatloaf, and then they just deflated into actual frogs. Wrath paused. Should I seat the next customers in that section or? No, everyone screamed in unison. The next hour was chaos. Pure, concentrated chaos that would have given health inspectors nightmares and insurance adjusters aneurysms. Frogs were everywhere, hopping, croaking, existing in ways that violated several laws of physics and probably a few health codes. And people kept coming in. We're closed, Darling shouted at a couple trying to enter. The sign says open, the man replied reasonably. Well, the sign is lying, and also there are frogs, so… Too late. They'd pushed inside and were promptly transformed into two medium-sized bullfrogs with what Darling could only describe as extremely confused expressions. Okay, Jack said, staring at the frogs that used to be people. Okay, we have to contain this. We have to. Bribe them, Johnny said, rubbing her eternally pregnant belly. When they turn back, if they turn back, we bribe them into silence. That's illegal, Judy pointed out. So is whatever the hell just happened to Bobby. Johnny snapped. Maxine, already thinking 3 steps ahead, grabbed the restaurant's petty cash box. How much is someone's silence worth? Everything we have, Darling said grimly. And possibly our souls, but honestly, after 14 kids, I'm not sure I have much of that left anyway. They managed to herd most of the frogs into the back storage area, a cavernous space that extended far beyond what the restaurant's exterior suggested, ending in a peculiar alcove that nobody ever used because it was approximately the temperature of a granite tomb and smelled faintly of cranberries for reasons nobody could explain. By midnight, 3 customers had turned into frogs and then, mercifully, turned back. 2 of them, a young couple who'd been on a first date, accepted $5,000 each and a lifetime of free meals to never speak of this again. They signed NDAs that Rath drafted on the spot, his organizational skills finally proving useful for something other than annoying reorganization of the supply closet. The 3rd customer was harder. I'm calling the health department, the man announced, his business suit still damp from his amphibious interlude. And the news. And probably the Department of Defense. Sir, Darling said, employing the kind of dangerous calm that her children recognized as more threatening than actual yelling, I really don't think. This is a public health crisis. I was a frog. I ate a fly. He was spiraling, his voice getting higher. I caught it with my tongue. Do you understand? My tongue extended like a… Jack walked over and simply placed a hand on the man's shoulder. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to take a long bath, not a bathhouse situation, just a regular bath, and you're going to convince yourself this was a stress-induced hallucination. Because if you don't, if you tell anyone about this, I will personally ensure that every restaurant, every bar, every establishment in this city knows that you're the guy who had an unfortunate incident in a forest that we all heard about. I never had an incident in a forest. Doesn't matter, Jack said cheerfully. Because I'll make sure everyone believes you did. The story involves a collie named Grace, a dog collar, and a complete misunderstanding of what Amazing Grace meant in that particular context. The man stared. That's slander. Prove it, Maxine said, appearing beside her father with her phone. I've already created 7 social media accounts ready to spread the story. Want to test who people will believe, a reputable family restaurant, or the guy claiming he turned into a frog? The man left without another word. For 2 weeks, they waited for the other shoe to drop. For news crews to descend, for health inspectors to arrive with hazmat suits, for the National Enquirer to show up wanting interviews. But nothing happened. The 3 customers kept their word, motivated by money, fear, or the simple human desire to not be known as that frog person. The actual frogs, meanwhile, did something impossible. They consolidated. It started slowly, Judy noticed it first when she went to check the storage area. The thousands of frogs had clustered together in the far back alcove, their bodies pressing against each other until they were barely distinguishable as individual creatures. And then, over the course of days, they began to compress, shrink, transform. By the end of the 2nd week, all that remained was a small wax cube, approximately 3 inches on each side, sitting in the darkest corner of the storage area like some kind of cursed artifact from a museum nobody wanted to visit. Should we touch it? Rath asked, staring at the cube with the same intensity he usually reserved for organizational systems. Absolutely not, Darling said. They touched it anyway. Well, the kids did, one by one, drawn by that irresistible curiosity that makes children excellent at discoveries and terrible at self-preservation. Maxine's discovery, the baffling. Maxine found the first anomaly while taking inventory, a task she hated but did anyway because someone had to be responsible, and apparently, at 17, she'd been elected. Behind a box of industrial-sized cranberry sauce cans. Why did they have so many? Nobody ordered cranberry sauce. She discovered a door. Not a metaphorical door. An actual door, complete with brass handle and hinges, set into the wall where no door should exist, because on the other side was supposed to be the alley with the dumpster. She opened it. On the other side was not the alley but a room, a small, perfectly square room with stained glass windows showing scenes that hadn't happened yet. She could see herself, older, wearing what looked like a judge's robe. She could see Judy doing something with computers and abstract art. She could see Bobby. She slammed the door shut, breathing hard. "Nope," she said to the empty storage area. "Nope, nope, nope." But she'd write down what she'd seen, document it with the same careful precision she used for everything, because if time was breaking down around them, someone needed to keep track. Judy's discovery, the bone-chilling. Judy found the photographs while looking for extra tablecloths. They were in an old box marked Commerce and Main, Dallas, 1963, which was weird because Abbotts had never had a Dallas location and certainly hadn't existed in 1963. Inside were photos from that day in Dallas. That specific day, November 22nd. JFK's motorcade. The book depository. Dealey Plaza. And in one photograph, barely visible in the background of a crowd shot, was Bobby. Her 9-year-old brother, wearing clothes from the 1960s, standing next to someone who looked exactly like Jack, but couldn't be because Dad would have been negative several years old in 1963. The timestamp on the photograph was authentic. She checked with 3 different historical archives online. The photo was real. Bobby was real in it. Her brother was somehow in Dallas, at that exact spot, on the day that changed America. Judy didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But she started researching time paradoxes with the kind of obsessive focus she usually reserved for technology and arguing with Maxine. Rath's discovery, the frightening. Rath's finding came while reorganizing the storage area according to his newest system, chronological by acquisition date, cross-referenced with usage frequency, because of course it was. He moved a stack of boxes and revealed a confessional booth. A Catholic confessional booth, complete with wooden panels and a divider, sitting in their storage area like someone had ordered it from a religious supply catalog and then forgotten about it. The really frightening part was that it was occupied. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," a voice said from inside. A familiar voice. Rath's own voice, but older, rougher, carrying the weight of decades. "Hello," Rath called out. "It's been 30 years since my last confession," his older self continued, not hearing him. "And I need to confess that I knew. I always knew what the wax cube would do, what it would cost, and I said nothing. What are you?" But the booth vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Rath standing alone, hands shaking, wondering what terrible knowledge his future self carried and why he'd kept it secret. Johnny's discovery. The exhilarating. Johnny, perpetually pregnant and tired of everyone's shit, found the formula while looking for a place to nap. It was written on the wall behind a shelf of supplies, hidden but not really, like someone wanted it found eventually but not immediately. It was a chemical formula, complex and beautiful, written in handwriting she recognized as her own but more confident, more assured. Below it, a note. "The pregnancy isn't real. It's a temporal anchor. You're holding the timeline stable. When Bobby returns, you'll deliver what you're actually carrying, the answer to everything. But you have to solve this first. J. 2047-inch. Johnny stared at her belly, which suddenly felt less like a burden and more like a mystery. She wasn't pregnant with a baby. She was pregnant with a solution, an answer, a key to something she couldn't yet comprehend. And for the first time in 2 years, she felt excited instead of exhausted. Barney's discovery, the elated. Barney, the janitor with the low IQ that everyone underestimated, found the topiary while taking out the trash. It had grown overnight in the alley, an elaborate hedge sculpture depicting the entire Abbott family, all 14 kids plus Jack and Darling, plus Bobby standing separate from the others, surrounded by beings made of leaves and branches. But Barney wasn't looking at the sculpture itself. He was looking at the base, where words had been carved into the earth, glowing faintly. Barney Henderson, keeper of memories, guardian of truth, smarter than they know. For 40 years, Barney had played dumb because it was easier, because people told him what to do, and he did it without complaint, because nobody expected anything from him. But the topiary knew. The topiary remembered what he'd hidden even from himself, that he'd been a professor once, before the lobotomy they'd forced on him in 1972 for being too different, before he'd rebuilt himself from scratch with fewer tools than he'd started with. He touched the words, and memories flooded back. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to know that he was supposed to be here, that his presence in this restaurant wasn't accident but design, that he had a role to play in whatever was coming. Barney smiled, really smiled, for the first time in decades, and went back to mopping floors, but now with purpose instead of routine. Judy, again the tide to Jack's childhood. The last discovery came 2 days before Bobby's return, and it was Judy who found it, though she wasn't looking. The wax cube had started humming, a low frequency that resonated in their bones, and when Judy touched it, she was pulled into something that wasn't quite vision and wasn't quite memory. She saw Jack as a boy, maybe 8 or 9, Bobby's age, standing in a trash bin behind what looked like a smaller, older version of Abbotts. He was crying, and a man who looked like an older, meaner version of Jack's father was screaming at him. "You'll never amount to anything. 14 kids? You think you deserve happiness? You think you deserve anything but this." Young Jack looked up, tears streaming, and said quietly, "I'll have 14 kids. And I'll love every single one of them. And I'll never make them feel like this." The vision shifted. Jack as a teenager, standing in front of a steeple, the same steeple that appeared in some of the other visions, making a promise to himself. Jack as a young man, meeting Darling at a bathhouse in the UK, decidedly not that kind of bathhouse, just the regular swimming kind, watching her eat cranberries straight from the bag and thinking, "That's the mother of my future 14 children." Jack proposing with a ring he'd made himself from granite because he couldn't afford a real one. Jack delivering each of his 14 children, his hands shaking every single time, terrified he'd fail them, terrified he'd become his father, terrified and brave and so full of love it hurt to witness. And then the final vision, Jack standing in this exact storage room, 40 years from now, looking at the wax cube and whispering, "It was worth it. All of it. Every impossible moment." Judy came out of the vision crying, understanding her father in ways she never had before, seeing the weight he carried, not of having 14 kids, but of trying to be better than the father who'd broken him, of trying to give them what he'd never had. She found Jack in the kitchen, doing prep work for tomorrow's shift, and hugged him without explanation. "I love you, Dad," she said. Jack, confused but pleased, hugged her back. "Love you too, kiddo. You okay?" "Yeah," Judy said, wiping her eyes. I get now. I get why you try so hard." 2 days later, the cliffhanger. It was 3 in the morning when the air in the storage area began to shimmer again. All 14 kids, minus Bobby, and Jack and Darling were there, having taken to sleeping in shifts near the wax cube because nobody wanted to miss Bobby's return. The cube began to glow, that same sickly chartreuse color from before, and the beings materialized again, looking somehow more tired than beings should be able to look. "He returns," the primary being said. "But changed. As promised." The air split open like someone had taken machetes to reality, and through the gap came Bobby. Except, Bobby was still 9, but also somehow not. His eyes held centuries. His posture was different, confident but wary, like someone who'd seen both the best and worst of humanity across ages. He wore clothes from multiple eras layered on top of each other, pantaloons from one century, a terry cloth robe from another, little cotton panties visible under everything like some kind of temporal fashion disaster. He was holding something. A book, ancient and crackling, with pages that seemed to be written in languages that hadn't been invented yet or had been forgotten long ago. "Mom," he said, and his voice was Bobby's, but also not, containing multitudes. "Dad, I know things now. I know why the frogs came. I know what the wax cube is. I know what's coming." "What is coming?" Darling asked, moving toward her son but stopping when the beings raised their appendages in warning. "Not yet," they said. "He must complete the transition. Must re-anchor to this timeline. If you touch him now, he'll scatter across every moment he visited." Bobby swayed, looking like he might collapse. Behind him, through the gap, they could all see flashes, the Old West, but Bobby was there, helping someone. Stonehenge, Bobby placing something at the center. The Industrial Age, Bobby preventing some kind of accident. The TV show Dallas filming on location, Bobby in the background with someone who looked exactly like. The gap closed. Bobby took one step forward. Then another. His eyes found Jack's, and in them, Jack saw himself, saw that young boy in the trash bin, saw the promise he'd made, saw 40 years of loving 14 impossible children, saw the weight of trying to be better than his father. Saw everything that Judy had seen in the vision. "Dad," Bobby whispered, and now he was just a 9-year-old boy again, scared and exhausted and needing his father. "Dad, you did good. In every timeline I visited, in every version of events I saw, you did good. You broke the cycle. You became exactly who you promised you'd be." Jack's knees buckled, and he caught his son as Bobby collapsed forward, the ancient book falling from his hands to land on the concrete floor with a sound like thunder. The beings began to fade. "Wait," Maxine demanded. "What about everything else? The discoveries? The cube? The book explains," the primary being said as it flickered out of existence. "But there's a passage you should read first. Consider it, context." And then they were gone, leaving the Abbott family alone with Bobby, unconscious but breathing, and the book lying open to a specific page. Darling picked it up, her hands shaking, and read aloud the passage marked in glowing ink. "And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. But before this, there was a plague of frogs, and the people did not understand. The frogs were not punishment but preparation, not curse but blessing, not ending but beginning. For what the people saw as chaos was actually order being rearranged, time being remade, reality being rewritten so that salvation might come not through the expected path, but through the impossible one. And the frogs, which the people feared, became the wax that sealed the covenant, became the key that unlocked the door, became the bridge between what was and what must be. Remember, every plague is a gift you haven't learned to open yet." Exodus 14 verse 21, the lost translation, the temporal codex. Darling looked up from the book, looked at her 14 children, all present now, Bobby breathing steadily in Jack's arms, looked at her husband who'd broken cycles and kept promises, looked at the wax cube, still glowing faintly in the corner. "Someone," she said carefully, "needs to explain what the absolute hell is happening. And someone needs to do it now." Bobby's eyes fluttered open. He sat up, still in Jack's arms, and smiled, a smile that was both 9 years old and ancient, both innocent and knowing. "I'll tell you," he said. "I'll tell you everything. But first, you all need to understand something important." "What?" asked Maxine, Judy, Rath, Johnny, and the other 10 Abbott children in unison. Bobby took a breath, looked at each of his family members, and delivered the words that would change everything. "We're not the heroes of this story. We're the villains. Or we will be if we make the wrong choice. And the beings didn't take me to save the timeline, they took me to show me how to break it. Because breaking it is the only way to fix everything that's wrong." And Mom, Dad, the choice they mentioned? The one they're offering us. He paused, and in that pause, the wax cube began to crack, and light poured out, not chartreuse or beige or dark brown, but pure white, the color of possibility, the color of every choice not yet made, the color of time itself coming undone and being remade. The choice, Bobby finished, is whether we save the world or save ourselves. And we can't do both. The light from the cube filled the storage room, spilled into the restaurant, poured out into the street, and for one impossible moment, everyone in the city, everyone in the world, felt it. A tremor in time, a shift in reality. A question being asked that demanded an answer. At Abbott's family restaurant on Bleecker and Vine, built on oil money and stubbornness, maintained by 14 kids and 2 parents who'd broken cycles and kept promises, the real story was just beginning. And somewhere, across time and space, in a dimension that existed in the gaps between moments, the beings watched and waited to see what the Abbotts would choose. Because every plague is a gift you haven't learned to open yet. And every family is a weapon you haven't learned to aim. End of Chapter 2. Complete manuscript so far. Grease Trap Gospel. Chapter 1. The Apparition at Abbotts. Full text of Chapter 1 as previously written. Chapter 2. The Frog Plague and the Wax Revelation. Full text of Chapter 2 as written above. To be continued in Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The Choice, the Society, and the Borden House. The light from the wax cube didn't fade so much as it folded back into itself, like reality taking a breath after screaming. Bobby stood in the center of the storage room, still wearing his temporal fashion disaster, looking at his family with eyes that had seen too much and understood too little. "We can do both," Darling said firmly, before anyone else could speak. "That's always been the Abbott way, refuse the binary, find the third option, make the impossible work because we're too stubborn to accept failure." Jack laughed, still holding Bobby, though the boy was clearly capable of standing now. "Honey, I love your optimism, but did you miss the part where he said we can't?" "I heard what he said." Darling set the ancient book down on a stack of boxes, her fucking pumps clicking against the concrete floor with the authority of someone who'd given birth 14 times and wasn't about to let interdimensional beings tell her what was possible. "And I'm saying he's wrong. Or incomplete. Or the beings who took him didn't give him the full picture." Bobby shook his head slowly. "Mom, I saw it. In every timeline where we try to save both. You saw timelines where other people tried," Maxine interrupted, that 17-year-old certainty making her sound older than her years. "You didn't see timelines where we tried. The Abbotts. All 16 of us, working together." 18, Barney said quietly from the doorway, making everyone jump. Nobody had heard him approach, which was typical Barney. Present but unnoticed, there but invisible, like furniture that happened to have consciousness. 18 if you count me in Grace. "Grace?" Judy asked. "My collie. She's in the truck." Barney stepped into the storage room, and something about his posture was different. Straighter. More confident. The man they'd all dismissed as simple was standing like someone who'd remembered how to be complicated. "And before anyone asks, yes, I know what's happening. I've always known. The topiary just helped me remember that I know." The silence that followed was the kind that happens when everyone's brain is trying to reboot simultaneously. "Barney," Jack said carefully, "are you saying?" I'm saying I was Dr. Bernard Henderson, professor of temporal physics at MIT, until 1972 when my research got too close to something the government didn't want discovered. They gave me a lobotomy, not the surgical kind, the chemical kind, the kind that makes you forget who you were and why you mattered. He smiled, and it was sad and fierce at once. I've been waiting 50 years for this moment. For the Abbotts to arrive at this exact point in space-time. Because you're not the first family they've approached. You're the 14th. Jesus Christ, Maxine whispered. Close, Barney said. But the actual number is more relevant. 14 families. 14 children in yours. 14 points of intersection where time can be rewritten. The beings aren't random. They're following a formula. And I'm the only one who survived from the last iteration who can tell you how to break it. Bobby sat down hard on a box labeled Dining Room Furniture, 1987, which made a concerning cracking sound. I didn't see this. In any of the timelines, I didn't see. Because they didn't want you to. Barney moved closer, his janitor's uniform suddenly looking less like clothing and more like a disguise he'd worn so long he'd forgotten it was one. The beings are controlled, Bobby. They're not autonomous. They're tools, weapons, instruments of something bigger. What? Darling demanded. Who? Barney corrected. 3 people. A secret society, though society is generous, more like a conspiracy of 3 who've learned to manipulate time itself for their own purposes. They call themselves the Architects. And they've been rewriting history for 400 years, creating ripple effects that serve their interests, eliminating threats before they emerge, ensuring power stays concentrated in specific hands. The wax cube pulsed, as if confirming his words. How do you know this? Rath asked, his organizational brain clearly trying to categorize this new information and failing. Because I was almost one of them. Barney's voice was heavy. Before the lobotomy, before I became what I am now, they recruited me. Showed me the mechanism, the beings, the way time could be bent. And I said no. So they made sure I'd never be able to tell anyone what I knew, except they didn't account for topiary carved by future events retroactively affecting past memories. He laughed, bitter. Time travel makes grammar impossible. Johnny, still holding her stomach that wasn't actually pregnant but was somehow gestating an answer, spoke up. So the beings took Bobby to show him we have to choose, but that's a false binary. The Architects want us to choose ourselves over the world because that's what every other family has done. Exactly, Barney confirmed. 13 families before you. All chose to save themselves. All disappeared into carefully constructed pocket timelines where they're safe and comfortable and completely irrelevant. The Architects eliminate threats by making them eliminate themselves. Voluntary exile disguised as salvation. But we can refuse, Jack said slowly, working through it. We can choose to fight instead of flee. You can try. Barney pulled something from his pocket, a small device that looked like it had been built from parts scavenged from a walkie-talkie, a GPS unit, and what might have been components from a 1950s radio. But here's what they didn't tell you. If you refuse their binary, if you try to save both yourselves and the world, they'll come for you directly. Not through beings and visions and time trips. Through their human agents, their accumulated power, their 4 centuries of preparation. They'll destroy this restaurant, this family, everything you've built. They'll erase you so thoroughly that history will never know you existed. Then we make history remember, Darling said, voice steady as granite. We document everything. We use every tool we have. A sound from the kitchen interrupted her, the distinct crash of something falling, followed by a smell that made everyone's stomachs turn. Not the normal restaurant smells of grease and coffee, and the perpetual undertone of motor oil from the parking lot. This was something organic and wrong, like meat that had been left under heat lamps for too long, like decay compressed into perfume, like journey's end written in olfactory terms. Maxine was the first through the door, followed by the stampede of Abbotts and one reawakened physics professor. They found the source immediately, under the heat lamps, a cardboard box that none of them had put there, that none of them had seen arrive, that simply existed now as if it had always existed. Inside was a pigeon. Or what had been a pigeon? Or what would become a pigeon if time moved in the expected direction? The bird was in multiple states simultaneously, alive and dead, fresh and rotted, whole and dissected. Its feathers were pristine white on one side, molted and gray on the other. One eye was bright and aware, the other was hollow socket. It was breathing and not breathing, existing and not existing, a Schrodinger's pigeon that someone had forced into observable reality before the wave function could collapse. Jesus, Judy whispered, pulling out her phone before remembering electronics died around temporal anomalies. It's a message, Barney said grimly. From the architects. This is what happens when you try to exist in two states, saved and saving, protected and fighting, inside and outside the timeline. You become contradiction. You become impossible. You become this. The pigeon made a sound that was simultaneously a coo and a death rattle. Get it out of here, Darling ordered, but her voice shook. No, Bobby said, moving closer to the box. No, this is important. This is trace evidence, not of what they can do, but of what they can't do perfectly. Look. He pointed at the bird's feet. On one talon was a small band, the kind they used to track birds. On it, inscribed in letters so tiny they were barely visible, LVRY 1892 FR. Livery Jack read. 1892 and FR Fall River? Fall River, Massachusetts, Barney confirmed, his face going pale. Oh no. Oh, they wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Maxine demanded. The Borden murders. August 4th, 1892. Lizzie Borden allegedly killed her father and stepmother with an axe. It's one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in American history, one of the crucial moments where he stopped, looking at the Abbott children. How old is Judy? 14, Darling said slowly. Why? Because Lizzie Borden was in her 30s when it happened, but the temporal signature required for what they're planning. He grabbed the ancient book Bobby had brought back, flipping through pages covered in languages that shifted as he read them. Here. The architect's formula. They need someone young, someone female, someone at a point of intersection between childhood and adulthood. They need someone who can witness without being suspected, who can move through 1892 Fall River as invisible because she's the wrong age to be relevant. Witness what? Judy asked, her voice smaller than usual. Barney looked up from the book, and his expression was answer enough. They're going to try to change the Borden murders, Bobby said quietly, still holding the knowledge from 100 timelines. They're going to try to make sure Lizzie is definitively guilty or definitively innocent, one or the other, because the ambiguity, the mystery, the not knowing, it created something they can't control. It created a ripple in time, a pocket of uncertainty that prevents them from fully manipulating that era. And if they can collapse that uncertainty, they can rewrite everything that came after, Barney finished. Labor movements, women's rights, the entire trajectory of criminal justice in America, all of it was influenced by the Borden case in subtle ways. Eliminate the mystery, and you eliminate the possibilities that grew from it. And they want to send Judy to stop it? Rath asked. To preserve the mystery? No, Barney said heavily. They want to send Judy to be it. To become part of the event, to get trapped in 1892, to become another piece of evidence that confuses rather than clarifies. They want her to be the thing that makes the case unsolvable, the anachronistic element, the impossible witness, the girl who couldn't have been there but was. Judy backed away from the pigeon, from the box, from all of them. No, I'm not going to. You won't have to, Darling started, but Barney was already shaking his head. She will, he said. Because the architects have already sent the beings. They're already en route. And the formula requires 3 sacrifices, 3 children sent to 3 crucial moments. Bobby was the first, the test case, the proof of concept. Now they need Chuck and Judy. Chuck. Jack looked around wildly. Where's Chuck? Here, a voice said from the storage room doorway. Chuck Abbott, age 15, stood there with the resigned expression of someone who'd already accepted the inevitable. He was their quietest kid, the one who watched and listened and spoke rarely but precisely, the one who'd somehow known about every major family crisis before it happened, as if he could sense disruptions in the Abbott timeline. "I felt them coming," Chuck said, walking into the kitchen. "About 5 minutes ago. The beings. They're outside, waiting." "And he took a breath. "I already said yes." "What?" Darling's voice could have stripped paint. "Chuck Abbott, you get your ass back here, and you." "Mom, someone has to go. They'll keep taking us one by one until we comply or until we're all scattered across time." Chuck's voice was steady, heartbreakingly mature. "Bobby went to learn. I'll go to fight. And Judy," he looked at his sister. "Judy will go to bear witness. Because that's what we do. Abbotts don't run. We document. We remember. We testify." The beings materialized then, flooding through the walls like mystique made solid, like perfume given form, like journey personified. There were dozens of them now, more than before, filling the kitchen with their impossible presence. "Chuck Abbott," the primary being said. "Come with us." "Where?" Jack demanded, moving to block his son. "Where truth goes to die," the being replied. "Where the architects keep their original sin. Where the first choice was made that led to all of this." "That's not an answer," Maxine said. "It's the only answer we can give while remaining within the parameters of causality." The being extended its appendages toward Chuck. "He will see what must not be seen. He will know what must not be known. And he will return changed, or not at all." "God damn it," Darling said, and started forward, but Barney caught her arm. "Let him go," the professor said quietly. "Let him go, because he's right. This is how you save both, by sending your children into the fire and trusting they'll come back forged instead of burned." "That's a hell of a metaphor for child endangerment," Jack said, but he wasn't stopping Chuck either. Chuck walked forward, passing through his family like they were the ghosts instead of the beings. At the last moment, he turned back. "Dad, remember what you promised yourself? In the trash bin, when you were 8. You promised you'd love us no matter what. This is the what. Love us through this." And then the beings took him, and he was gone, dissolved into probability and potential, scattered across space-time like seeds planted in soil made of paradox. The silence afterward was broken by thunder, actual thunder, the kind that comes with storms, though the sky outside had been clear moments before. Lightning flashed through the kitchen windows, illuminating the pigeon box, the wax cube visible through the storage room door, and the faces of 14 children, now -2, 2 parents, and 1 professor who'd waited 50 years to be useful again. "Okay," Darling said, voice shaking but functional. "Okay, we adapt. We pivot. What do we need to?" The back door exploded inward. Not metaphorically. Not dramatically in the sense of someone bursting through. Actually exploded, hinges ripping free with splintering, as a white truck crashed through the opening and into the kitchen, stopping inches from the prep station. Barney moved faster than anyone thought possible, throwing himself between the truck and the Abbott family, and the vehicle's front end crumpled against him without moving him an inch. The professor stood there, arms outstretched, and for a moment, he wasn't a janitor at all but something else, something that had been human once and had been changed by the same forces that changed Bobby and would change Chuck and Judy. "Force field," he said casually, as if this was normal. "Temporal density manipulation. I can borrow mass from my future self and bring it into the present. Makes me effectively immovable. Also makes my future self very sore, but that's tomorrow Barney's problem." 3 people climbed out of the truck. 2 men and 1 woman, all of them wearing clothes that seemed to be from multiple eras at once, all of them carrying an air of authority that came from owning time itself. "The architects," Barney said, and his voice was cold. "You never come in person. What's changed?" "The Abbotts changed," the woman said. She was maybe 40, maybe 400, with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall and had found all of them equally boring. "They're the first family to figure it out before the 3rd sacrifice. They're the first to have you, Bernard. The wild card we thought we'd neutralized." "You can't have Judy," Darling said, grabbing a knife from the prep station. "You can have this blade between your ribs, but you can't have my daughter." The woman laughed. Mrs. Abbott, we already have her. The moment Chuck left, the timeline shifted. Judy is already in Fall River. She's already in 1892. She's already waking up the day before the Borden murders, and there's nothing you can do to bring her back until she completes her role. What role? Judy demanded, except it wasn't Judy, not anymore. The 14-year-old standing among them was flickering, her outline unstable, her presence uncertain. You're not here, the woman said to flickering Judy. You're an echo, a resonance, a ghost of intent. The real you is already there, already confused, already in danger. Then send me too, Jack said. Send me to 1892. Let me protect her. Can't, one of the male architects said. He was younger, maybe 30, with the kind of face that was handsome in a threatening way, like a knife that was also a mirror. Adult temporal displacement requires exponentially more energy. You'd arrive scattered across a decade. By the time you reassembled, she'd be long dead or erased. Then what can we do? Maxine demanded. Watch, the woman said. Learn. Understand that you cannot fight us. We've been doing this for 400 years. We've rewritten the Magna Carta, prevented the Industrial Revolution from happening 30 years early, ensured that every major technological advancement served our interests. We are Times editors, and you're a typo we're correcting. Editors, Bobby said quietly, still holding knowledge from 100 timelines, miss things. They miss the small errors, the minor inconsistencies, the trace evidence that reveals the truth. You missed Barney. You missed the topiary. You missed the fact that Johnny's not actually pregnant, but is gestating something you can't control. The architects turned to Johnny, who smiled despite her terror. That's right, she said, rubbing her stomach. I'm not carrying a baby. I'm carrying information. Compressed data from every timeline where you failed, every moment where your control slipped, every instance where people chose differently than you wanted. And when I deliver, when the temporal anchor releases, all of that information becomes real, becomes evidence, becomes proof. Impossible, the second male architect said. He was older, 60s maybe, with the weathered look of someone who'd lived through actual history instead of just rewriting it. We monitored every Abbott pregnancy. We would have known. You monitored pregnancies, Wrath interrupted, his organizational brain making connections. You didn't monitor not pregnancies. You didn't account for someone faking gestation, using the expectation of pregnancy to hide data accumulation. It's invisible because you never thought to look for it. The three architects looked at each other, and for the first time, they seemed uncertain. Barney, the woman said carefully, what have you told them? Everything, Barney replied, still standing between the Abbotts and the crushed white truck. The formula, the previous families, the way you've been pruning the timeline for centuries. All of it. Then you've killed them, she said flatly. Because now we can't just exile them. Now we have to erase them completely. Try it, Barney said, and suddenly he was holding something, the device he'd built from walkie-talkie parts and GPS components, now glowing with the same light that had come from the wax cube. I spent 50 years building a backup. A copy of reality before you started editing it. And if you erase the Abbotts, I release the backup. I let everyone see what the world was supposed to be, what you took from them, what you've stolen across 4 centuries. The standoff lasted 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. Then a black cat walked through the broken door. Just a normal black cat, sleek and dark, with eyes that reflected light in ways that seemed almost intentional. It walked calmly through the debris, around the truck, between the architects and the Abbotts, and sat down directly on the cardboard box containing the impossible pigeon. Grace, Barney said, and laughed despite everything. Not the collie. The cat. Your collie is named Grace, Maxine said, confused. My collie was named Grace. Past tense. Before she died in 1978 and was reincarnated as a cat who's been following me for 40 years, aging backwards, getting younger while I got older, until tonight when she finally has enough temporal energy to matter. Barney knelt down, and the cat jumped into his arms. Grace was my research partner. The only one who understood the math. And when they lobotomized me, they killed her or thought they did. But you can't kill something that exists in reverse time. The cat meowed, and it sounded like agreement, like vindication, like 4 decades of waiting finally paying off. This is absurd, the woman architect said. This is Abbotts, Darling replied, still holding the knife. Absurd is our brand. Now get out of my restaurant before I decide that temporal paradoxes are less scary than pissed-off mothers. The older male architect smiled, and it wasn't nice. You still don't understand. Judy is already in 1892. Chuck is already wherever we sent him. Bobby has already been changed. And even if you somehow manage to bring them back, even if you somehow defeat us, which you can't, you'll have to live with what they've become. What they've seen. What they've done. We're parents, Jack said simply. That's already our job description. Living with what our kids become, supporting them through what they've seen, loving them despite what they've done. You're not threatening us with anything we weren't already prepared for the moment we had 14 children. Thunder cracked again, closer this time, and the lights flickered, not from electrical problems, but from temporal instability, from the sheer weight of too many possibilities existing in one location. The woman architect looked at her companions, some unspoken communication passing between them. Fine, she said finally. You want to play this out? You want to see what happens when a family tries to fight 4 centuries of accumulated power? We'll let you try. We'll watch you fail. And when you're broken, scattered across time, erased from every meaningful moment of history, we'll use your failure as a lesson for the next family that gets ideas. They turned to leave, walking back toward the crushed white truck that somehow started despite its destroyed front end. Wait, Bobby called out. You said there were 13 families before us. What happened to them? The woman paused at the door. They're still there. Trapped in their pocket timelines, living out comfortable lives, safely removed from everything that matters. Happy. Protected. Irrelevant. And you think that's mercy? Maxine asked. I think it's survival, the woman replied. Which is more than you'll have. The truck reversed out of the kitchen, the broken door somehow repairing itself as they left, time literally running backwards to erase the evidence of their intrusion. Within 30 seconds, it was as if they'd never been there at all. Except for the lingering smell of paranoia and motor oil. And the knowledge that Judy was already in 1892, already in danger, already approaching a moment that would define not just her life, but potentially all of history. The next 6 hours were preparation and paranoia in equal measure. Barney used his device to create a shield around the restaurant, not a physical barrier but a temporal one, making Abbotts exist slightly out of sync with the rest of reality, harder to find, harder to target, buying them time to plan. Johnny sat in the office, her not-pregnant stomach glowing faintly as she began to deliver the information she'd been carrying. It came out as papers, as files, as evidence that materialized from nothing, documentation of every moment the architects had changed, every choice they'd influenced, every timeline they'd pruned. Wrath organized it all, creating a system that cross-referenced dates and events and alterations, building a map of exactly how reality had been edited across 4 centuries. Maxine worked with Bobby, trying to understand the ancient book he'd brought back, decoding the languages that shifted and changed, looking for weaknesses in the architect's formula. The other 10 Abbott children, whose names hadn't been mentioned but who were absolutely present and absolutely important, did what they always did, kept the restaurant running, because if you're going to fight temporal tyrants, you might as well do it with a full stomach and clean tables. Jack and Darling stood in the kitchen, looking at the spot where Chuck had vanished, where Judy had flickered out, where Bobby had returned changed. We're losing them, Darling whispered. One by one, we're losing our babies. No, Jack said firmly, pulling her close. We're sending them out to fight. There's a difference. We're not losing them, we're trusting them. Trusting that we raised them right, that they're strong enough, that they'll come back. And if they don't? Jack thought about the trash bin, about the promise he'd made, about 40 years of trying to be better than his father, about 14 kids who deserved a dad who believed in them even when believing seemed impossible. Then we go get them, he said. All of us. Whatever it takes. However long it takes. We're Abbotts. We don't leave family behind, even if behind is across 4 centuries and requires rewriting the laws of physics. Darling laughed, wet and broken and somehow still defiant. You know that's crazy, right? Honey, we have 14 kids and a restaurant that keeps getting attacked by time travelers. Crazy is just our baseline now. At 3 a.m., something changed. The wax cube, still sitting in the storage room, began to crack further. Not breaking, transforming. Each crack released light, and the light formed words, hanging in the air like subtitles for reality. Jack Abbott location, the first choice. Status, witnessing. Danger level, catastrophic. Message, it's worse than we thought. They're not editing history. They're editing causality itself. Send help. Send evidence. Send. The message cut off. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. Judy Abbott location, Fall River, Massachusetts, August 3, 1892. Status, confused but functional. Danger level, moderate to severe. Message, I'm in a house with chamber pots and people who think electricity is witchcraft. Also, I think I saw Lizzie Borden. Also, I think she saw me. Also, there's someone else here who shouldn't be. Someone from our time. Someone who. That message also cut off. Barney looked at the messages, at the Abbott family gathering around the wax cube, at Grace the backwards aging cat sitting on his shoulder, and made a decision. I'm going after Chuck, he said. I can navigate the temporal channels, find where they sent him, bring him back if possible. You said adults can't travel without scattering, Maxine objected. I'm not a normal adult. I'm a lobotomized temporal physicist who's been living slightly out of phase with reality for 50 years. I'm already scattered, I just learned to keep all my pieces close together. He pulled out another device, this one looking like it had been assembled from parts of a GPS, a lightning rod, and what might have been a piece of chamber pot, don't ask. This will let me reassemble if I start to drift. But someone needs to go after Judy. I'll go, Bobby said immediately. No, Barney replied. You've already been displaced once. A second trip could lock you out of this timeline permanently. It needs to be someone who hasn't traveled yet, someone young enough to survive the displacement, someone smart enough to navigate 1892 without causing more disruptions. Everyone looked at each other, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Who goes? And that's when the heroic act happened. Barney turned to the assembled Abbott children, all 12 still present. Bobby couldn't go. Judy was already gone. Chuck was already gone, leaving 12, and said, I need a volunteer. Someone brave enough to walk into history, smart enough to get Judy out, and Abbott enough to do it without instructions. 3 hands went up immediately. Then 5. Then all 12. Even the youngest ones, even the ones who were clearly terrified, but more terrified of losing their sister. Darling looked at her children, looked at Jack, looked at Barney, and felt something shift inside her. Not breaking. Transforming. No, she said. I'm going. Darling, Jack started. I'm going, she repeated, her voice steady as granite, as chamber pots that had witnessed a century of secrets, as dining room furniture that had held up generations of family dinners despite everything. I'm their mother. If anyone's going to walk into danger to bring my daughter home, it's me. You'll scatter, Barney warned. Adults can't. Then I'll scatter, Darling said. And I'll pull myself back together through sheer spite and maternal instinct. I've done more with less. I've survived 14 childbirths, Barney. You think 1892 is going to kill me? There was a long pause. Then Barney smiled, really smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he'd been hoping for exactly this response. Okay, but you'll need equipment. Protection. Information. He spent the next hour preparing her, giving her a device that looked like a walkie-talkie merged with a perfume bottle for communication across time, a small vial of something that smelled like motor oil and lightning for emergency temporal displacement, and a crash course in 1892 social customs that basically boiled down to be quiet, be modest, and for God's sake, don't mention women's suffrage or they'll think you're insane. At 4 a.m., as the first hints of dawn touched the sky outside, darling Abbott stood in the storage room, surrounded by her family, preparing to walk into history. Jack held her hand, his grip tight enough to leave marks. "Come back to me." "Always have," darling said. "Always will. Even if I have to walk through 4 centuries to do it." She kissed him, kissed each of her children, even the ones who squirmed away because public affection was embarrassing, and stepped into the light that poured from the wax cube. The last thing she heard was Bobby's voice, "Mom. Tell Judy we're figuring it out. Tell her the pigeon was a clue, not a threat. Tell her." But then she was gone, scattered across space-time, pulled through the temporal channels that connected Abbott's restaurant in 2025 to Fall River, Massachusetts in 1892. And as she reformed on the other side, as she became solid and real and present in a different era, one thought crystallized in her mind. My daughter needs me. Nothing else matters. Meanwhile, in Fall River, Massachusetts, August 3, 1892, one day before everything changed. Judy Abbott woke up in a room that smelled like chamber pots and lye soap and the particular staleness that comes from lives lived without air conditioning or hope. She was lying on a bed with a mattress that felt stuffed with regret and covered with linens that were probably white ones, but had aged into an unfortunate beige. The room was small. The ceiling was low. The walls were covered in wallpaper with a pattern that suggested whoever designed it had recently survived a mild stroke. She sat up, head pounding, and tried to remember how she'd gotten here. The beings. The kitchen. The flickering. The feeling of being pulled through something that wasn't quite space and wasn't quite time, but was definitely unpleasant. And then, nothing. And then, here. She looked down at herself and nearly screamed. She was wearing clothes from the 1890s. A long dress made of fabric that was probably supposed to be sophisticated, but mostly just looked uncomfortable. Stockings. Boots that laced up to her calves. No phone. No GPS. No way to contact anyone or know where she was or... A sound from downstairs. Voices. Angry voices. Judy crept to the door, opened it a crack, and listened. Don't care what you think, Lizzie. You'll do as you're told or you'll get nothing. You've already given me nothing. A woman's voice, sharp with decades of accumulated resentment. You married that woman, brought her into Mother's house, and expect me to smile and accept it? Your mother has been dead for years. Then why do I still hear her? Silence. Then footsteps, heavy and male, walking away. Judy's hands were shaking. She knew this story. Everyone knew this story. Lizzie Borden, accused of murdering her father and stepmother with an axe, allegedly giving her father 40 whacks and her stepmother 41. Though the actual numbers were lower and the facts were disputed, and the whole thing became a gruesome nursery rhyme that kids still sang without understanding what they were singing about. And Judy was here. The day before it happened. In the actual house where it would happen. She needed to get out. Needed to find help. Needed to. A hand touched her shoulder. Judy spun around, ready to fight or scream or both, and found herself face to face with a woman in her 30s wearing a dress that was somehow both period appropriate and completely wrong. The cut was right, but the fabric was too new, the color too vibrant. The overall effect suggesting someone who'd studied 1892 fashion, but had never actually lived in 1892. You're Judy Abbott, the woman said quietly. Don't scream. Don't run. And for God's sake, don't tell anyone you're from 2025, or they'll lock you in an asylum faster than you can say temporal displacement. Who are you? Judy whispered. Someone who's been trying to stop this for a very long time, the woman replied. Someone who knows what the architects are planning. And someone who's going to help you survive the next 48 hours. The woman smiled sadly. Because I'm the last surviving member of the 13th family. The one that came before you. The one that almost succeeded. She pulled Judy into the room and closed the door. My name is Margaret. Margaret Chin. And I've been trapped in this loop, arriving August 3rd, watching the murders happen August 4th, trying to prevent them or document them or understand them, and then being reset back to August 3rd. For what feels like 70 years, but is actually just the same 2 days repeating over and over. Judy's brain struggled to process this. You're stuck in a time loop? Not exactly. I'm stuck in a probability loop. Every iteration, things change slightly. Sometimes Lizzie kills them. Sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes someone else does. Sometimes they die of natural causes that are definitely not natural. But every time, I fail to break the pattern and I reset. Margaret moved to the window, peering through lace curtains at the street below. The architects need this moment to remain ambiguous. Need the mystery to persist. Because as long as nobody knows for certain what happened here, they can manipulate the ripple effects. They can influence how people think about justice, evidence, reasonable doubt, all the concepts that grew from this case. But why send me here? Judy demanded. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to become another piece of the puzzle. Another element that makes the case unsolvable. They're going to try to make you a witness who can't testify, or evidence that can't be verified, or Margaret stopped, her face going pale. Oh God. Oh no, they wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Your mother. Is your mother named Darling? Yes, how did you? Because I just saw her, Margaret said, pointing out the window. She's walking up the street right now, looking confused and furious and completely out of place, and if she comes to this house, if she knocks on that door, the architects will have exactly what they need. Judy pressed her face against the window and saw her mother, unmistakable even in the wrong century, even wearing what looked like a hastily acquired 1890s dress that didn't quite fit. Even with her hair done in a style that would have been fashionable in Fall River but looked slightly wrong because Mom had obviously done it herself without a mirror or patience. I have to get to her, Judy said, moving toward the door. No. Margaret grabbed her arm. If you go out there now, if you're seen together, the architect's agents will know. They're watching this house. They're always watching this house. Then what do I do? Margaret thought for a moment, her expression cycling through several emotions before landing on resigned determination. We create a distraction. Something big enough that everyone's attention shifts, that gives your mother time to find us, that disrupts the architect's surveillance long enough for us to compare notes and figure out what they're really planning. What kind of distraction? The kind that involves chamber pots, a thunderstorm, and a very unfortunate misunderstanding about indoor plumbing. Margaret smiled grimly. Welcome to 1892, Judy Abbott, where the mystique of the past is mostly just inconvenience dressed up with better grammar. Downstairs, the Borden house, 20 minutes later. Darling Abbott stood in the parlor of the Borden house, having talked her way inside by claiming to be a distant relative passing through town. Thank God Barney had given her that crash course in 1890s etiquette and tried not to stare at everything that was wrong. The dining room furniture was real wood, heavy and dark, the kind that would last centuries. The walls were covered in wallpaper that made her restaurant's chartreuse and beige scheme look tasteful by comparison. Chamber pots sat in corners, and the whole house smelled like a combination of lye soap, repression, and the particular tension that comes from people who hate each other but can't leave. A woman entered the parlor, mid-30s, plain but not unattractive, with eyes that held the kind of intelligence that had nowhere to go in this era except inward, where it curdled into something sharper and more dangerous. You're the cousin from? The woman prompted. Providence, Darling lied smoothly, pulling the name from half-remembered geography. I'm terribly sorry to impose, but I'm passing through on my way to Boston, and I thought. Thunder cracked outside, sudden and violent, though the sky had been clear moments ago. The woman Lizzie, had to be Lizzie, glanced toward the window. Strange weather today. Everything feels wrong, doesn't it? Like the air is waiting for something to happen. I'm sure it's just, Darling started, but then the lights flickered. Except there were no electric lights in 1892 Fall River. The gas lamps shouldn't flicker. But they did, and in that flicker, Darling saw something impossible. A figure standing in the corner of the room, translucent and wrong, wearing clothes that were both period-appropriate and completely anachronistic. An architect agent. Had to be. They'd followed her through time. Miss Borden, Darling said carefully, I wonder if I might use your facilities? Lizzie raised an eyebrow. The privy is out back. Of course, Darling said, moving toward the back of the house, toward where her maternal instincts insisted her daughter must be, toward whatever confrontation was about to happen. She made it to the base of the stairs when she heard the crash. Upstairs, simultaneously. Margaret had created her distraction by the simple expedient of accidentally knocking over a chamber pot in the hallway, creating a mess that would require immediate attention and draw the household staff upward. Go, she whispered to Judy. Well, everyone's distracted. Find your mother. She's in the house somewhere. I can feel the temporal disruption she's causing just by being here. Judy slipped into the hallway, trying to move quietly in boots that were designed for a completely different understanding of stealth, and nearly collided with a man coming up the stairs. He was older, 60s maybe, with the kind of face that suggested he'd been handsome once, but life had worn away at it, leaving only hardness and disappointment. His eyes were all wrong. Too aware. Too knowing. Too much like the eyes of someone who'd seen more than 1892 should offer. You, he said quietly. You're the Abbott girl. Judy froze. Don't be afraid, the man said, though his tone suggested she should absolutely be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to offer you a choice. The same choice we offered your parents, your brothers, your whole family. I don't want your choice, Judy said, backing away. You don't even know what it is yet. He smiled, and it was terrible. We can send you home right now. Erase your presence here, ensure you never arrived, let you go back to your family without any of this mattering. All you have to do is promise to forget what you've seen, what you've learned, what you know about us. And Lizzie Borden? Judy asked. What happens to her? What was always going to happen, the man said. The murders occur. The trial happens. The mystery persists. Everything stays uncertain, stays malleable, stays under our control. So she definitely kills them? Judy demanded. Or definitely doesn't. Which is it? The man's smile widened. That's the beautiful thing. It's both. It's neither. It's whatever we need it to be in any given timeline. Lizzie Borden is our masterpiece, a woman who exists in perpetual quantum uncertainty, guilty and innocent simultaneously, useful precisely because she's unknowable. That's sick, Judy said. That's power, he corrected. And you can go home, go back to your family, live your life, or you can stay here, become part of the evidence, become another element that makes the case impossible to solve. Your choice. Thunder cracked again, closer now, and through the window Judy could see lightning illuminating the sky in patterns that looked almost intentional, almost like someone was writing messages in electricity. I choose my family, Judy said. I choose fighting you. I choose. The man moved faster than should be possible, his hand reaching for her, and Judy stumbled backward, crashing into Margaret who'd appeared behind her. Run! Margaret shouted, pushing Judy toward the stairs. They ran. The parlor, 3 minutes later. Darling heard running footsteps and positioned herself at the base of the stairs. The knife she'd smuggled through time, don't ask how, temporal displacement does weird things to pockets, ready in her hand. Judy appeared first, nearly falling down the stairs in her rush, and Darling caught her, pulled her close, felt the overwhelming relief of having her daughter solid and real and present. Mom? Judy's voice was small. Mom, you came? Of course I came, baby girl. Did you think I'd let you face 1892 alone? Darling looked up as Margaret descended more carefully, followed by the man who was definitely an architect agent. And who's he? Bad guy, Judy said simply. Good enough for me. Darling raised the knife. Back off, or I demonstrate what 40 years of kitchen work does to upper body strength. The man laughed. Mrs. Abbott, you can't threaten me with a knife. I've survived 4 centuries. I've walked through wars and plagues and... Darling threw the knife. Not at him, at the gas lamp behind him. The resulting explosion of flame and gas wasn't huge, but it was enough. Enough to cause chaos, enough to make Lizzie Borden scream from the parlor, enough to bring Andrew Borden, Lizzie's father, running from his study, enough to create the exact kind of scene that would be remembered, documented, puzzled over. And in the chaos, Margaret grabbed both Darling and Judy and pulled them toward the back of the house. The livery stable, she gasped. There's a weak point in the temporal fabric there. It's where I've been trying to escape for 70 years. It might work for you. They ran through the kitchen, noting the layout that would become famous, the dining table where Andrew Borden would allegedly be sleeping when he died tomorrow, out the back door, across a yard that smelled like privy and regret, and into a small stable that housed a single horse and approximately 3 centuries of accumulated hay. Margaret pulled out something from her dress pocket, a device that looked like it had been built from 1890s materials, but with a design that screamed temporal technology. I've been building this from whatever I could find. Pieces of a telegraph, parts from a lightning rod, copper wire from the electrical system they haven't installed yet. It should create a resonance with your home time, should pull you back. Should, Darling demanded. Should is the best I can offer after being trapped for 70 years. Margaret snapped, then softened. Look, you have maybe 2 minutes before the architect agent recovers and comes after you. Before more agents arrive. Before Andrew Borden sees enough of you to remember your faces and make you part of tomorrow's investigation. You need to go now. Come with us, Judy said. Margaret smiled sadly. I can't. I'm locked to this moment. But you're not, you're fresh disruptions, new variables. You can escape. And when you do, tell your family what you learned. Tell them the architects don't just edit history, they create prisons inside moments, trapping people in loops where they can observe and control without risking their own timeline. She activated the device and the air began to shimmer. Tell them to look for the others, Margaret added quickly. The 13 families before yours. We're all trapped somewhere, stuck in significant moments, unable to escape but not quite erased. If you can find us, if you can free us. We will, Darling promised. I swear on all 14 of my children, we'll come back for you. 15, Margaret said cryptically. You'll understand later. Now go. She pushed them into the light, and reality bent around them like motor oil spreading across water, like thunder given form, like the ripple effect of every choice they'd made leading to this moment. The last thing Darling saw before Fall River disappeared was Margaret standing in the livery stable, surrounded by hay and horse smell and the weight of 70 years, smiling through tears as she watched them escape the prison she couldn't leave. And the last thing Judy saw was the architect agent appearing in the stable doorway, his face twisted with rage, reaching for Margaret. But then they were gone, pulled back through time, through space, through the invisible channels that connected 1892 to 2025, falling through centuries like rain falling upward, like thunder running backward, like everything that had been broken learning how to reassemble. Abbott's Restaurant, The Storage Room, August 4th, 2025, 4:47 a.m. Darling and Judy materialized in the storage room, collapsing to the floor in a tangle of period clothing and temporal displacement nausea. Jack was there immediately, pulling them both into his arms, not caring that they smelled like chamber pots and lye soap and 1892, not caring that they were crying or that the whole family was crowded into the storage room staring at them. You came back, he whispered into Darling's hair. You both came back. I told you I would, Darling managed. Always have. Always will. Bobby helped Judy to her feet, and she clung to her younger older brother who'd been changed by his own journey through time. "It's worse than we thought," she said, voice shaking. "The architects aren't just changing history. They're imprisoning people inside it, trapping them in significant moments like insects in amber. Margaret, the woman who helped us, she's been stuck in August 3rd and 4th, 1892, for what she experiences as 70 years. Living the same 2 days over and over, watching the Borden murders happen or not happen, unable to escape." "How many others?" Maxine asked quietly. 13 families, Judy replied. 13 families before us, all trapped in different moments. And we promised we'd free them. Rath was already making notes, his organizational brain cataloging this new information. 13 families, 13 significant historical moments. We need to identify them, map them, figure out how to reach them. "And we need to find Chuck," Jack added. "He's still out there somewhere, witnessing whatever first choice means." As if summoned by his name, the wax cube, which had been sitting dormant, suddenly blazed with light again, and a new message appeared. "Chuck Abbott location. The first choice identified, Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. Status: horrified but functional. Danger level: extreme." Message: they're not editing history. They're editing the foundation of Western religion. They changed what books went into the Bible. They removed texts, added others, created the template for information control that they've been using for 1,700 years. I found the original documents. I found what was supposed to be included. And they know I found it. They're coming for me. If I don't make it back, if this is my last message, tell Dad I understand now. Tell him I understand why he broke the cycle, why he chose love over power, why he... The message cut off abruptly, replaced by a single word that appeared in blood-red light. Compromised. The storage room went silent except for the sound of thunder outside, actual thunder this time, not temporal manipulation, just a storm rolling in over the city, over the restaurant, over the Abbott family standing in their storage room surrounded by evidence of impossible things. Jack stared at the message, his face gone pale. "They have my son." "They have several of our children," Darling corrected, but her voice was shaking. "But we're going to get them back. All of them. However long it takes. However many centuries we have to walk through." "We need a plan," Maxine said, "always practical even in crisis. We need resources. We need to understand what the pigeon meant," Bobby interrupted, looking at the cardboard box still sitting under the heat lamps. Inside, the impossible bird had finally stabilized, no longer existing in multiple states, just dead now, normal dead, the way things are supposed to die. Except, when Bobby lifted the bird out of the box, something fell from its beak. Something small and metallic and clearly not from 1892 or 325 AD or any natural timeline. It was a USB drive. "How the hell?" Judy started. "Trace evidence," Barney said, materializing from wherever he'd been, probably preparing to go after Chuck, probably building another impossible device from spare parts and determination. "Someone sent us a message disguised as a pigeon, disguised as a warning. Someone who has access to both our time and the past. Someone who..." He plugged the USB drive into a laptop that Johnny had pulled from somewhere, and the screen lit up with a single document. "To the Abbott family. You're not the first to resist. You won't be the last. But you might be the ones who succeed, if you understand what you're actually fighting. The architects aren't human anymore. They were once, but they've replaced so much of themselves with temporal technology that they're more construct than person. They don't experience time linearly. They don't age, don't die, don't change except by choice. But they have a weakness. Every change they make creates a debt. A temporal debt that has to be balanced somewhere, sometime, by someone. For 400 years, they've been transferring that debt to the 13 families. Trapping you in moments, making you bear the weight of the changes they've made. You're not prisoners, you're anchors. You're holding reality stable while they edit it. If you free the 13 families, if you break the anchors, all 400 years of changes will come due at once. the architects will be forced to pay the debt themselves. And that debt will destroy them, or transform them back into regular humans subject to regular time. But here's the cost. Breaking the anchors means releasing all the changes simultaneously. History will rewrite itself. Everything the architects altered will snap back to its original form, or close to it. The ripple effects will be catastrophic. People will die who lived. People will live who died. The world you know will cease to exist in its current form. The choice isn't save the world or save yourselves. The choice is destroy the world as it exists to create the world as it should have been. Are you brave enough? Are you Abbott enough? We'll find out. MC, Trapped but Not Defeated, 1892. Margaret Chin had sent this. Somehow. Across 133 years, disguised inside an impossible pigeon, delivered at exactly the right moment. The Abbotts stood in silence, reading and rereading the message, understanding slowly crystallizing like ice forming on a window. So we have to choose, Judy finally said. We can free the families and fix history, but it means destroying everything we know. Or we can leave things as they are and let the architects keep controlling reality. That's not a choice, Darling said firmly. That's a test. And Abbotts don't fail tests. We just redefine the parameters until we pass. She looked at her family, at Jack, who'd broken cycles and kept promises, at her 14 children, minus Chuck, who was in 325 AD, and minus Bobby, who was sort of present but fundamentally changed, at Barney, who'd waited 50 years to be useful, at Grace the backwards aging cat, sitting on a shelf watching everything with eyes that held centuries. We're going to free all 13 families, Darling announced. We're going to break the anchors. We're going to force the architects to pay their debts. And we're going to do it without destroying the world, because that's what Abbotts do. We find the impossible third option. We refuse the binary. We save everyone. How? Rath asked, genuinely curious rather than skeptical. I have absolutely languages. One restaurant built on oil money and stubbornness. And more spite than any family should legally possess. If that's not enough to rewrite reality on our terms instead of theirs, then reality needs to lower its expectations. Thunder cracked outside, and the lights flickered, but this time it felt different. Not threatening. More like applause. Like the universe itself was saying, okay, show me what you've got. The wax cube pulsed once, twice, and then displayed a final message. Jack Abbott, status update. Message. I heard everything through the temporal resonance. Mom's right. There's always a third option. I found it in the documents they tried to hide. There's a passage, a verse they removed from the Bible because it gave people too much power. It says, time is not a river but a garden. What the powerful prune away, the faithful can regrow. And every moment erased can be remembered back into existence by those who loved it enough to mourn its loss. If we can get all 13 families to remember together, to mourn together what was taken, we can regrow the timeline without destroying the current one. We can have both. We can. The message stabilized and a new line appeared. Jack Abbott, extraction in progress. Barney Henderson en route. Estimated arrival, 47 seconds. Everyone turned to look at the center of the storage room, where space was beginning to fold like origami made from physics, where light was bending in ways that suggested someone was coming back, someone was returning. Someone had succeeded in navigating the temporal channels and bringing their family home. 47 seconds. 46. 45. The Abbott family waited, together, ready for whatever came next. Ready to fight the architects. Ready to free the imprisoned families. Ready to rewrite reality on their own terms. Ready to prove that 14 kids, 2 parents, and a stubborn restaurant built on oil money could do what 4 centuries of temporal tyrants thought impossible. And somewhere, in 1892 Fall River, Margaret Chin watched through the temporal resonance and smiled, knowing that for the first time in 70 years, escape wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Cliffhanger. But in that 45th second, something else happened. Something nobody expected. The lights went out completely, not flickering, not dimming, just gone, as if someone had erased electricity from the concept of reality. And in the darkness, a voice spoke. Not the beings. Not the architects. Something else. Something older. You think you understand the game, the voice said, coming from everywhere and nowhere. You think you've identified the players. You think you know the rules. But you've forgotten the most important question. Who created the architects? Who gave them the ability to edit time? Who decided that reality should be malleable in the first place? The darkness pressed in, heavy and aware. My name is Lilith. I am the first editor, the original architect, the mother of temporal manipulation. And I have been waiting 6,000 years for a family Abbott enough, stubborn enough, impossible enough to do what needs to be done. A pause. Your son Chuck found the removed verses. Good. But he didn't find all of them. He didn't find the one that explains why I exist. Why time can be edited. Why causality is negotiable. Another pause, longer. He didn't find the verse that says, and Lilith, cast out from Eden, was given dominion over time itself, so that she might revenge herself on the God who made her secondary, on the Adam who replaced her, on the reality that deemed her unworthy. And her revenge shall be subtle and long, and she shall unmake creation one moment at a time, until nothing remains but her choice of what could have been. The darkness lifted slightly, enough to see shapes but not details. The architects are my children. The 13 families are my test subjects. And you, the Abbotts, you are my final experiment. My masterpiece. My attempt to answer one question: can a family built on broken cycles and kept promises actually resist the pull of power? Or will you, too, eventually choose to edit rather than accept, to control rather than surrender, to become the very thing you're fighting? The lights came back on abruptly, blindingly bright. The storage room was empty except for the Abbott family and one additional figure, a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of every creation myth simultaneously, wearing a dress made from what might have been starlight or might have been the absence of starlight, with eyes that held the weight of 6 millennia and the coldness of someone who'd been wronged before time had rules. Lilith, the first editor, standing 3 feet away from darling Abbott, smiling. Let's see if you're different, she said. And the countdown hit 0. And the storage room exploded with light as Barney and Chuck materialized in the center of everything, holding documents that glowed with temporal energy, carrying knowledge that could free the 13 families or damn them all, arriving at exactly the wrong moment or exactly the right one depending on your perspective. Chuck's eyes met his mother's, then shifted to Lilith, then widened with recognition and horror. Mom, he whispered. Mom, we need to run. Right now. Because she's not here to test us. Then why is she here? Darling demanded, still holding the knife because some weapons transcend eras. Chuck's voice was steady despite his terror, carrying the weight of knowledge gathered in 325 AD, carrying the truth that the architects had tried to hide for 17 centuries. She's here to watch us fail, he said. Because she's been writing this story for 6,000 years. And in every version, every iteration, every timeline, the family always fails. Always chooses wrong. Always becomes what they hate. Lilith's smile widened. Prove him wrong, she said. I dare you. And outside, the storm that had been building all night finally broke, thunder and lightning and rain pouring down on Abbott's restaurant like the world was trying to wash away 6,000 years of accumulated edits, trying to return reality to some original state that nobody alive could remember. Inside, the Abbott family stood together, facing down the mother of temporal manipulation, carrying the weight of 13 trapped families, holding the evidence that could free everyone or destroy everything. And the choice, the real choice, not the binary the architects offered, not the test Lilith expected, but the impossible third option that only a family Abbott enough could conceive, was about to be made. Grease Trap Gospel. Chapter 4: The Closet, the Choice, and the Coming Storm. Lilith moved through Abbott's storage room like smoke given purpose, her dress trailing starlight or absence of starlight, her presence making the air taste like copper and regret. The Abbotts stood frozen, not from fear, though there was plenty of that, but from the sheer impossibility of processing that they were face to face with something that predated history, that had invented the very concept of rewriting reality. 6,000 years, Darling finally said, her voice steady despite everything, is a long time to hold a grudge. Lilith laughed, and it sounded like glass breaking in reverse. You think this is about revenge? How limited. How human. She circled the family, examining them like a professor evaluating students who'd misunderstood the assignment. This is about proving a point. Adam was given dominion over creation. I was given dominion over time. And I've spent 6 millennia demonstrating that controlling time is infinitely more powerful than controlling space. By torturing families? Judy demanded, still wearing her 1892 dress, still smelling like chamber pots and lye soap. By trapping 13 families in time loops? By creating the architects to do your dirty work? By testing, Lilith corrected. By observing. By documenting what happens when people are given the power to change anything, to edit any moment, to rewrite any outcome. And do you know what I've learned? She stopped directly in front of Jack, looking at him with eyes that held millennia. Everyone chooses power. Everyone edits. Everyone becomes exactly what they claimed they'd never become. The cycle is unbreakable. Except Dad broke his cycle, Chuck said quietly, still holding the ancient documents from 325 AD, his 15-year-old voice carrying weight beyond his years. He was supposed to become his father, angry, bitter, cruel. And he chose love instead. He chose differently. Lilith turned to Chuck, interested now. Did he? Or did he simply edit himself? Replace one version of Jack Abbott with another, prune away the parts he didn't like, rewrite his own narrative until it was palatable. She looked back at Jack. Tell me, Mr. Abbott, are you genuinely different, or are you just better at hiding the same darkness? Jack opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Darling watched her husband struggle with a question he'd probably asked himself 1,000 times, late at night when the kids were asleep and the restaurant was quiet and the doubts came crawling. I'm both, Jack finally said. I'm different because I chose to be. But I'm also the same person who came from that trash, from that background, who had that father, who carries those scars. I didn't edit myself. I grew. There's a difference. Is there? Lilith's smile was sharp. Synonyms and antonyms, Mr. Abbott. Growth and editing. Change and replacement. Evolution and rewriting. The words are different, but the mechanism is the same, rejecting what was, creating what should be. You think you're noble for choosing love. I say you're just another editor, working on a smaller scale. Then what would you have us do? Maxine demanded, stepping forward with 17-year-old fury. Accept everything? Never change? Stay exactly as we are forever. I want, Lilith said slowly, to see if anyone can resist. To see if anyone can look at the power to change anything and choose to change nothing. To see if anyone can accept reality as it is rather than as they wish it to be. She gestured at the wax cube, still glowing faintly. The 13 families all failed. They all tried to edit, to improve, to fix. And in doing so, they became my anchors, trapped in the moments they tried to change. Barney, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. But Margaret Chin told us how to break the anchors. How to free the families without destroying everything. Yes, Lilith agreed. She found the loophole in my experiment. The way to remember things back into existence, to regrow what was pruned. Clever girl. I always liked her. She paused. Of course, I'm the one who left her the clues to find that solution. Because I wanted to see what you'd do with it. The storage room went silent except for the sound of rain hammering the roof, the storm outside matching the storm inside. You're saying this is still a test, Bobby said, his ancient young eyes understanding faster than the others. You're saying even the solution is part of the experiment. Everything is part of the experiment, Lilith confirmed. Margaret's message. The USB drive in the pigeon. Chuck finding the removed verses. Judy escaping 1892. All of it, every moment, every choice, every seeming coincidence, has been orchestrated to bring you to this exact point. She pulled something from the folds of her dress, a manila envelope, yellowed with age or perhaps existing outside of age entirely. Inside this envelope is the complete list of all 13 families and the moments where they're trapped. The dates, the locations, the specific circumstances, everything you need to free them. She held it out toward Darling. Take it. Execute Margaret's plan. Break the anchors. Force the architects to pay their temporal debts. Become heroes. Darling didn't move. What's the catch? She asked. The catch, Lilith said, is that freeing the families means accepting that reality is flexible, malleable, editable. And once you accept that, once you use that knowledge, even for good reasons, even to free innocent people, you become editors yourselves. You become what the architects are. What I am. And the cycle continues. So either we leave 13 families trapped forever, or we become the thing we hate? Rath asked, his organizational brain already trying to find the flaw in the logic. That's not a choice, that's coercion. Welcome to existence, Lilith replied. Every moral choice is coercion. Every decision to act changes something, edits something, rewrites some small part of reality. The only way to remain innocent is to do nothing. But doing nothing is also a choice, also an edit, also a way of shaping what continues to exist and what doesn't. Johnny, still holding her stomach full of information instead of a baby, spoke up. But you said you wanted to see if anyone could resist. If anyone could look at power and choose not to use it. So what happens if we refuse the envelope? If we say no to both options? Lilith's expression shifted, something that might have been respect or might have been predatory interest. Then I would be genuinely surprised for the first time in 6,000 years. But also, 13 families remain trapped. The architects continue their work. Nothing changes. Nothing changing is also a choice, Darling said slowly, working through it. You're forcing us to choose between active harm and passive harm. Between editing reality ourselves or letting the architects keep editing it. But there's a third option you're not mentioning. Is there? Lilith's smile returned. We expose you, Darling said. We tell everyone in every timeline what you've been doing. We document it, share it, make it impossible for you to continue your experiment in secret. We turn the observer into the observed. Lilith laughed, genuinely delighted. Oh, Mrs. Abbott, do you think I haven't been observed? Do you think I'm not documented in every religious text, every mythology, every creation story across every culture? I'm the original cautionary tale, the woman who refused to submit, who was cast out, who was made into a demon for wanting equality. I've been observed for 6,000 years, and it hasn't stopped anything. Because you controlled the narrative, Judy interjected. You edited your own story, made yourself into what you needed to be in each culture. But what if we told the truth? The whole truth, not the edited version. Then people would call you crazy, Lilith said simply. Or they'd believe you and nothing would change, because humans have an infinite capacity for knowing the truth and choosing comfortable lies anyway. The rain outside intensified, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like laughter or applause. Chuck stepped forward, still clutching the documents from 325 AD. You said you wanted to see if anyone could resist. If anyone could look at power and choose differently. So here's what I don't understand. If we're just another iteration of your experiment, if you've already decided we'll fail like everyone else, why are you here in person? Why reveal yourself at all? Lilith went very still. Because, Chuck continued, his voice gaining confidence, you're not sure anymore. Are you? 13 families failed exactly as you expected. But we're different. We're already not following your script. Bobby came back changed but not broken. Judy escaped 1892 with Margaret's help, which means Margaret broke her loop enough to send messages. Mom walked through time armed with nothing but spite and maternal instinct. And Dad's been breaking cycles his whole life. He held up the documents. And these verses you had removed from the Bible? They don't just explain time manipulation. They explain you. They explain that you were given dominion over time not as power but as burden. That editing reality isn't your revenge, it's your prison. Every change you make, every moment you alter, every timeline you prune, it adds to a debt you have to carry. And after 6,000 years, that debt is crushing you. Lilith's face had gone expressionless, which was somehow more frightening than any emotion. You're not testing us, Chuck finished. We're testing you. You're looking for someone to either prove your worldview correct, that everyone becomes an editor, everyone chooses power, or to prove it wrong and free you from your own experiment. The silence that followed was the kind that feels like reality holding its breath. Then Lilith did something unexpected. She sat down on a box labeled Dining Room Furniture, 1987, and put her face in her hands. 6,000 years, she whispered. 6,000 years, and a 15-year-old boy figures it out in 15 minutes. The Abbott family looked at each other, uncertain whether this was genuine vulnerability or another layer of manipulation. Barney moved closer, cautious. The temporal debt. It's destroying you. Not destroying, Lilith said, looking up. Transforming. Every edit, every change, every pruned moment, I feel it. I carry it. I am the anchor for my own anchors. The 13 families bear the weight of the architect's edits. The architects bear the weight of history's edits. And she laughed bitterly. I bear the weight of all of it. 6,000 years of rejected timelines, unlived moments, people who could have existed but didn't. I am a living graveyard of possibilities. Then let it go, Darling said simply. Stop editing. Stop testing. Stop trying to prove your point and just let reality be what it is. I can't, Lilith said. The moment I stop, the moment I release my control, all 6,000 years of debt comes due simultaneously. The universe corrects. And the correction will be she paused, searching for words. Have you ever seen a bowel movement after weeks of constipation? Imagine that, but with causality. That's disgusting, Judy said. That's accurate, Lilith replied. The universe has been holding in 6,000 years of natural consequences while I've been editing them away. If I let go, everything releases at once. Civilizations that should have risen won't have. Technologies that should have been discovered earlier arrive late. People who should have lived die. People who should have died live. The ripple effects will rewrite everything. Like what we do by freeing the 13 families, Bobby said, understanding. Except magnified by a factor of several thousand. Exactly. Lilith stood up, composed again. So you see the real choice. Not whether to edit or accept, but whether to risk cosmic correction for the sake of freedom, mine, the 13 families, humanity's freedom from manipulation. Or whether to maintain the edited status quo because the alternative is potentially catastrophic. Maxine, always practical, asked the crucial question, what happens to you if we trigger the correction? I become human again, Lilith said simply. Mortal. Linear. Subject to time instead of controlling it. I get to die, eventually, like I was supposed to 6,000 years ago. And you want that, Jack said, understanding. You're tired. I am so very tired, Lilith agreed. But I'm also terrified. Because I don't know if I remember how to be just human. If I remember how to experience time moment by moment instead of all at once. If I remember how to, she paused. How to love without editing. How to accept loss without trying to undo it. How to be mortal. Johnny, still gestating information, spoke softly. Everything I've been carrying, all the data about failed timelines, about the architect's edits, about reality as it should have been, it's all preparation for this moment, isn't it? For the correction. So we can guide it instead of letting it happen chaotically. Yes, Lilith confirmed. When you deliver, when you release that information, it becomes a map. A guide for how the universe should rearrange itself. It won't prevent all the chaos, but it will minimize it. It will turn a cosmic catastrophe into merely a very bad day for reality. Merely, Wrath muttered, making notes on everything despite the impossibility of organizing information like this. Barney had been studying the manila envelope, still in Lilith's hand. The 13 families. If we free them as part of triggering the correction, if we do it all simultaneously, they become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. They help anchor the new reality instead of the old one. Correct, Lilith said. But you'd need to reach all 13 simultaneously. Coordinate across centuries. And you'd need someone to go back to 1892, to the Borden house, on August 4th, the actual day of the murders. Because that moment, more than any other the architects have manipulated, is the linchpin. It's the moment where uncertainty became weaponized, where not knowing became a tool of control. Break that, collapse that uncertainty into certainty, even if we never reveal what the certainty is, and the whole structure starts to crumble. Someone would have to witness, Chuck said slowly. Someone would have to be there at the exact moment and see what actually happened. Not to tell anyone, necessarily, but to know. To anchor the truth in observation, even if the observation remains private. Yes, Lilith confirmed. And that someone would need to hide, Judy added, working through it. Because if they're seen, if they're known to be there, they become evidence. They become part of the public record. They change the outcome by being observed themselves. A closet, Bobby said suddenly, his ancient young eyes seeing across timelines. There's a closet at the top of the Borden stairs. Small, cramped, hot in August. Nobody would think to check it during the investigation. It's the perfect place to hide and witness without being witnessed. Who? Darling asked, though she already knew the answer. Who goes into that closet? The Abbotts looked at each other. 14 children, well, most of them present, 2 parents, 1 reactivated temporal physicist, 1 backwards aging cat, 1 woman who'd existed since Eden. I'll go, Judy said. I've already been to 1892. I already know the house, the layout, the... No, Maxine interrupted. You've been there, which means you're known. Margaret saw you. The architect agents saw you. Lizzie Borden might have seen you. You're too visible. Then who? Jack demanded. Who hasn't been to 1892? Who could hide in a closet for hours while he stopped, face going pale? While they hear someone being murdered with an axe. While they hear the sounds, the violence, the... I'll go. Everyone turned to look at Wrath. The 7th Abbott child, the organizer, the one who'd spent his life creating systems to make sense of chaos, stood there with the kind of calm that comes from having thought through all possibilities and accepted the worst one. I'll go, he repeated. I'm good at staying still, staying quiet, staying unnoticed. And he paused, struggling with the words. I need to see. I need to know. Because if we're going to rewrite reality, if we're going to trigger a cosmic correction, I need to anchor myself in one absolute truth. One moment that I witnessed, that I know happened, that can't be edited or rewritten or manipulated. Even if I never tell anyone what I saw, I'll know. And that knowing will keep me stable when everything else is changing. Darling looked at her 7th child, her organizational genius, her systematic thinker, her boy who'd always tried to impose order on the beautiful chaos of a 14-child household. You'll hear things, she said carefully. Things no one should have to hear. Violence. Death. The kind of sounds that stay with you. I know, Wrath said. But someone has to witness. And I'm the one who needs it most. Because my whole life has been about trying to control chaos, trying to organize uncertainty. This will teach me that some things can't be organized. Can only be endured. Can only be remembered. That's very mature for a how old is Wrath? Jack asked, realizing none of them had mentioned his age. 17, Wrath said. Same as Maxine. We're twins. We are. Maxine demanded. Fraternal. Very fraternal. I've been waiting for someone to notice, but with 14 kids, it's easy to overlook details. Wrath smiled slightly. Kind of proves my point about needing better organizational systems. Despite everything, despite Lilith sitting on their furniture, despite the cosmic correction looming, despite the 13 trapped families and the architects and 6,000 years of temporal manipulation, several of the Abbott children laughed. Because of course they had twins and nobody had noticed. Of course that was the kind of detail that got lost in the chaos of a 14-child household. Of course it was absurd and perfect and very Abbott. Lilith watched them laugh, and something in her ancient expression softened. "You people are genuinely insane." "Thank you," Darling said. "We work hard at it." 3 hours later, preparation and planning. The Abbott family worked through the night, preparing for what Barney was calling the correction, and what Darling kept referring to as the cosmic bowel movement we're about to trigger, which made the younger kids giggle and the older ones groan. Johnny had begun her delivery, a process that looked like nothing so much as her sitting in the office, concentrating, while papers materialized around her, documents appearing from nothing, each one containing crucial information about how reality should rearrange itself. Wrath was organizing them immediately, creating systems within systems, building a framework for guiding chaos. Maxine and Bobby worked on decoding more of the ancient book, finding additional verses that had been removed from religious texts, discovering that almost every major religion had references to Lilith and her temporal prison that had been edited out over centuries. Chuck was being examined by Barney, who was checking for temporal contamination after his trip to 325 AD. "You seem stable," the professor announced. "Though you're going to have very weird dreams about the Council of Nicaea for the rest of your life." "Already do," Chuck said. "Did you know they debated for 3 weeks about whether Christ's essence was homoousios or homoousios? One letter. 1 iota. That's where we get not 1 iota of difference." They were arguing about vowels while deciding the nature of divinity. "Religion is wild," Judy agreed, still wearing her 1892 dress, because somehow in all the chaos nobody had found her normal clothes. Jack and Darling sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee that was approximately 60% coffee and 40% existential dread, holding hands across the prep station. "We're really doing this," Jack said. "We're really going to trigger a cosmic correction that will rewrite 6,000 years of history." "Yep," Darling confirmed. "Our kids might not survive." "They might not." "The world we know might cease to exist." "Probably will." "And we're okay with this?" Darling squeezed his hand. "Honey, we had 14 kids in a world that already doesn't make sense. We've been living in chaos our whole lives. At least now we're choosing the chaos instead of having it chosen for us." Jack laughed, exhausted. "I love you. You know that? Even after all this, maybe especially after all this, I love you." "I know," Darling said. "Now drink your coffee and help me figure out how to explain to Wrath that he needs to pack light for 1892 because they don't have deodorant and he's going to be in a very small closet for several hours." Lilith had been watching the family work, sitting in the corner of the storage room like a temporal monument, and finally spoke up. "You're all going to die, you know. Not today, not from the correction, but eventually. Mortality. Entropy. The natural progression of linear time. And there's nothing you can do about it. No editing, no do-overs, no rewinding to fix mistakes. Just life, and then death, and then nothing." "Yeah," Darling said, appearing in the doorway with coffee for everyone. "That's kind of the point. That's what makes it meaningful. That's what makes the time we have with each other matter." "I wouldn't know," Lilith said quietly. "I've spent 6,000 years editing away every loss, every ending, every moment of grief. I don't remember what it feels like to lose someone and not be able to bring them back." Bobby sat down next to her, his ancient young eyes understanding. "It feels terrible. It feels like your chest is being crushed and you can't breathe and nothing will ever be okay again. And then, eventually, it feels a little less terrible. And you learn to carry it. And the carrying becomes part of who you are." "That sounds awful," Lilith said. "It is," Bobby agreed. "But it's also how you know you love them. The grief is proof. The absence is evidence. And you don't get to edit that away without also editing away the love that caused it. Lilith was quiet for a long moment. "The love that dare not speak its name," she finally said. "Not homosexual love, though that's what the phrase came to mean. But the original meaning, the love so profound that language fails, that words can't capture, that exists beyond what can be spoken. That's what I edited away. That's what I lost when I became this." She looked at the Abbott family, all of them messy, all of them flawed, all of them loving each other in ways that were complicated and simple and impossible to define but absolutely real. "When the correction happens," Lilith said, "I'm going to feel 6,000 years of grief all at once. Every person I edited away, every timeline I pruned, every moment I prevented, all of it simultaneously. It might destroy me before the mortality does. Or," Darling said, handing her a cup of coffee, "it might make you human again. Might give you back what you lost. Might be the first honest emotion you've felt in 6 millennia." Lilith took the coffee, stared at it like she'd forgotten what coffee was, and took a sip. "It's terrible," she said. "I know," Darling replied. "I've been making terrible coffee for 40 years. It's part of my charm." August 3rd, 1892, Fall River, Massachusetts, 11:47 p.m. Rath materialized in an alley behind the Borden house, wearing clothes that Barney had somehow procured from a historical society. Don't ask how. Temporal displacement makes theft complicated, carrying nothing but a canteen of water and a small notebook, because even witnessing a murder required proper documentation. The air smelled like privy and coal smoke, and the particular thickness of August in New England before air conditioning made summer survivable. He moved quietly through the darkness, approaching the house from the back, looking for the unlocked window that Margaret Chin had told them about, the one that the real murderer had, possibly, used. The one that would let him access the second floor without going through the front door. He found it, climbed through, stood in a hallway that would become famous, that would be photographed and studied and analyzed for over a century, trying not to think about what was coming. The closet was at the top of the stairs, exactly where Bobby had said it would be. Small, dark, hot even at midnight. Rath opened it carefully, finding it full of coats that smelled like mothballs and age and the general staleness of lives lived in repression. He climbed inside, pulled the door almost closed, leaving a crack so he could breathe, so he could see, and settled in to wait. The house was quiet except for the sounds of breathing, sleeping, the settling of old wood in summer heat. Somewhere below, a clock ticked. Somewhere above, in the attic, something creaked. Rath checked his pocket watch, borrowed from Jack, who'd inherited it from his father, who'd probably stolen at 11:53 p.m. 9 hours until the murders. 9 hours alone in a closet, waiting to witness something that would define American criminal history, waiting to see what really happened, waiting to anchor one truth in observation while the rest of reality prepared to correct itself. He drank water. He shifted position. He tried not to think about the fact that he was a 17-year-old kid hiding in a closet, about to witness a double homicide with an axe. He thought about it anyway. Meanwhile, Abbott's restaurant, August 4th, 2025, 6:30 a.m. The rest of the Abbott family had worked through the night, and now dawn was breaking over the city, light creeping through the restaurant windows like reality checking to see if they were ready. They weren't ready. But they were going anyway. Johnny had finished her delivery, thousands of pages of documentation now organized by Rath's system, which he'd set up before leaving for 1892, because of course he had, creating a framework for how the universe should rearrange itself. Maxine and Bobby had decoded enough of the ancient book to understand the mechanics of the correction, to know what would happen when Lilith released her control and 6,000 years of temporal debt came due. Chuck had been briefed on his role. He would return to 325 AD at the exact moment of the correction, would ensure that the original biblical texts were preserved somewhere, would anchor that knowledge in history even if it took centuries to resurface. Judy would return to 1892, but a different date, August 5th, the day after the murders, when the investigation began. She would ensure that Margaret Chin was freed from her loop, would help her escape forward in time to the present. The other Abbott children, whose individual names and roles hadn't been detailed but who were absolutely crucial, would work with Barney to reach the other 12 trapped families, to coordinate the simultaneous release, to make sure that when the correction happened, all 13 families were freed at once. Jack and Darling would stay at the restaurant, would serve as the anchor point, would hold the present stable while their children reached into the past to break the chains. And Lilith would let go. Are we sure about this? Maxine asked for the 70th time. Are we absolutely sure we want to rewrite 6,000 years of history? No, Darling said honestly. But we're sure we don't want to leave 13 families trapped. We're sure we don't want the architects controlling reality. And we're sure that Lilith deserves to be human again, to feel mortality, to grieve and love without editing. So we're sure enough. That's terrible logic, Maxine said. That's Abbott logic, Jack corrected. Lilith stood in the center of the storage room, looking smaller somehow, more vulnerable, more human already just from the anticipation of what was coming. When I let go, she said, it will take approximately 47 seconds for the full correction to propagate through time. 47 seconds of every timeline, every moment, every possibility rearranging itself according to Johnny's documentation. It will feel like, she paused. It will feel like the universe is having a seizure. Reality will flicker. Memories will contradict each other. You might remember things that didn't happen and forget things that did. But if you hold on to each other, if you anchor yourselves in your relationships instead of your certainties, you'll survive. 47 seconds, Bobby repeated. That's how long it took for me to return from my first displacement. That's how long it took for Barney and Chuck to arrive. 47 seconds keeps appearing. Is that significant? It's the duration of a human heartbeat in temporal terms, Lilith explained. The length of time it takes for one moment to become the next. 47 seconds is how long it takes for now to become then. It's the universe's pulse. Poetic, Wrath's voice came through the temporal communicator Barney had built, crackling across 133 years. But I'm in position. It's 6:45 a.m. here. The murders happen around 10:30 to 11 a.m. I'm ready when you are. Everyone else? Jack asked. One by one, the responses came in. Chuck, ready in 325 AD. Judy, ready to jump to August 5th, 1892. Barney plus Abbott children 4 to 13, ready at all 12 other family locations. The only person who hadn't checked in was Margaret Chin, but she couldn't. She was still trapped in her loop, waiting to be freed, unaware that this time, this iteration, would be her last. Darling looked at her family, at Jack, who'd broken cycles, at her children, scattered across time, at Lilith, about to become mortal, at the wax cube still glowing in the corner, at Grace the backwards aging cat sitting on a shelf with ancient eyes, at Barney, who'd waited 50 years to be useful and was about to save 13 families plus one woman who'd existed since Eden. Okay, she said. Let's rewrite reality. Let's trigger a cosmic correction. Let's free everyone and hope we survive the aftermath. She pulled out a crocheted Afghan from somewhere, one of those blankets that had been in the family forever, that had covered babies and comforted sick kids and been present at every major family moment for generations. She wrapped it around Lilith's shoulders. Everything will work itself out, Darling said firmly. Everything will be okay. I don't know how and I don't know when, but it will. Because that's what always happens to families who refuse to give up. Lilith touched the Afghan, feeling the texture of something made with care over time, something that existed not because it was edited or perfected, but because someone had sat down with yarn and needles and patience and created something to keep people warm. I'm ready, she said. And she let go. The correction, 47 seconds, that changed everything. Later, when they tried to describe what happened, the Abbotts would struggle with language. Because how do you explain what it feels like when reality hiccups? When causality has a seizure? When 6,000 years of temporal debt comes due all at once. Second one. The lights flickered, but not just electrical lights, all light, everywhere, every photon suddenly uncertain about its trajectory. Second 5. Memories began contradicting each other. Darling remembered having 15 children, no wait, 14, no wait, 13, because one was never born, no wait, that's wrong, 14 is right, isn't it? Second 11. The architects appeared in the restaurant, all three of them, looking panicked, trying to re-establish control, trying to edit away what was happening. But their power was gone. Their tools were defunct. They were just three humans who'd lived too long and done too much, and were now facing consequences they'd spent 4 centuries avoiding. Second 17. Across time, 13 families began to remember, began to wake up, began to realize they'd been trapped and were now being freed. Margaret Chin in 1892 felt the loop break, felt time moving forward instead of resetting, felt the possibility of escape opening like a door she'd thought was painted on the wall. Second 23. Lilith screamed. 6,000 years of accumulated grief hit her all at once. Every person she'd edited away, every timeline she'd pruned, every moment she'd prevented. The weight of it should have killed her, would have killed her, except she was surrounded by Abbotts, and Abbotts don't let people die alone even when those people are ancient temporal manipulators who kind of deserve it. Second 30. Wrath, in his closet in 1892, heard footsteps downstairs. Heard a door open. Heard voices, Andrew Borden's voice, saying something about going to rest. Heard footsteps on the stairs. Heard. He pressed his hand over his mouth to keep from making noise, from breathing too loud, from being discovered. Second 35. The universe began to stabilize. Johnny's documentation was working, guiding the correction, minimizing the chaos, turning catastrophe into merely disaster, turning disaster into merely very bad, turning very bad into merely unfortunate. Second 40. The wax cube in Abbott's storage room cracked completely, spilling light that wasn't chartreuse or beige or any color that had a name, light that was pure possibility, pure potential, pure permission to be different than before. Second 45. In 1892, Wrath heard it. The sound no one should hear. The sound that would define this moment, this case, this mystery. Muffled sounds from downstairs could have been many things, could have been nothing, could have been exactly what everyone thought it was. And then silence. Terrible silence. He waited. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just witnessed. Second 47. Reality solidified. Time resumed its normal pace. The correction was complete. And everything was different. And nothing had changed. Both were true simultaneously, because that's how cosmic corrections work. They rearrange the furniture of history while leaving the house structurally intact. The immediate aftermath, Abbott's restaurant, probably still August 4th, 2025, though nobody was entirely sure anymore. Darling blinked, looked around the storage room, and took inventory. 14 children, no, wait, that was right. 14 was correct, check. One husband who'd broken cycles, check. One woman who used to be an immortal temporal manipulator and was now sobbing uncontrollably into a crocheted Afghan, check. One backwards aging cat looking smug about something, check. Everyone alive, she called out. A chorus of responses from around the restaurant confirmed that yes. Correction was complete. And everything was different. And nothing had changed. Both were true simultaneously, because that's how cosmic corrections work. They rearrange the furniture of history while leaving the house structurally intact. The immediate aftermath, Abbotts restaurant, probably still August 4th, 2025, though nobody was entirely sure anymore. Darling blinked, looked around the storage room, and took inventory. 14 children, no, wait, that was right. 14 was correct, check. One husband who'd broken cycles, check. One woman who used to be an immortal temporal manipulator and was now sobbing uncontrollably into a crocheted afghan, check. One backwards aging cat looking smug about something, check. Everyone alive, she called out. A chorus of responses from around the restaurant confirmed that yes, everyone was alive, though several people were confused about what day it was, whether the restaurant had always had that crack in the ceiling, and why Maxine's hair was suddenly 3 inches longer. Did it work? Jack asked, helping Lilith sit down before she collapsed completely. I don't know, Darling admitted. How do you tell if reality has been corrected? The answer came from the temporal communicator, Wrath's voice crackling through. It worked. I'm still here. I'm still in the closet. It's 11:17 a.m., August 4th, 1892. And I just heard, his voice broke. I just heard something I can never unhear. But I saw something too. Through the crack in the door. I saw. Static interrupted him. Wrath? Jack called out. Son. I'm okay. I'm okay. But Dad, Mom, everyone, I know what happened. I know who did it. I know the truth about the Borden murders. Tell us, Maxine demanded. No, Wrath said firmly. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to solve the mystery. I'm here to witness that there is a truth, that something definite happened, that reality is real even when we don't know all the details. The architects' weaponized uncertainty made it so not knowing became their tool. But now I know. And knowing, without telling, is enough to break their power. That's incredibly unsatisfying, Judy said. That's the point, Wrath replied. Some truths don't need to be shared. They just need to exist. Now get me out of this closet. It's like 100 degrees in here. I haven't peed in 6 hours, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have nightmares for the rest of my life. Barney, who'd been monitoring the correction from his makeshift temporal laboratory, the corner of the kitchen with the most stable electromagnetic field, spoke up. I can extract him, but we need to do the same for all the other children simultaneously. The 13 families are freed, but our kids are still out there holding the anchors. We need to bring everyone home. Do it, Darling ordered. What followed was organized chaos, Barney activating extraction protocols, temporal channels opening throughout the restaurant, children materializing from various points in history looking exhausted and traumatized and weirdly proud of themselves. Chuck appeared first, covered in dust from 325 AD, holding a scroll case containing original documents from the Council of Nicaea. I saved the texts they tried to hide, including the good ones about women's equality and the importance of doubt in faith. Going to be very awkward for several denominations when these resurface. Judy appeared next, bringing Margaret Chin with her, the woman who'd been trapped for 70 subjective years looking simultaneously ancient and newborn, free for the first time in what felt like forever. You came back, Margaret said to Judy, her voice hoarse from disuse. You came back for me. Of course we did, Judy replied. Abbotts don't leave people behind. The other Abbott children materialized one by one, each bringing with them a member of one of the 13 trapped families. A man from the 1960s who'd been stuck witnessing the Kennedy assassination. A woman from 1906 San Francisco stuck in the earthquake. A teenager from 1939 Poland stuck at the beginning of World War II. A child from 1692 Salem stuck during the witch trials. And 9 others, each pulled from their temporal prisons, each freed by an Abbott child, each looking dazed and grateful and uncertain about what came next. The restaurant was suddenly very crowded. Okay, Darling said, surveying the chaos. Okay, everyone who's been temporally displaced, sit down before you fall down. Everyone who knows what day it is, raise your hand. Everyone who needs to pee, the bathroom is through there and you might want to form a line. She was in full mother mode, which was apparently the appropriate response to a restaurant full of time refugees. Wrath materialized last, stumbling out of the temporal channel looking pale and shaken. Jack caught him before he fell, pulled him into a hug that the 17-year-old returned with the desperation of someone who'd just witnessed the worst of humanity and needed to be reminded that good still existed. "I heard it, Dad," Wrath whispered. "I heard the spatter. The muffled sounds. The everything. It was real. It happened. And it was worse than anyone imagines and also simpler and also more complicated, and I can't explain it without revealing what I saw, and I can't reveal what I saw because that's not the point. The point is I know. I anchored it in observation. And now the uncertainty is gone even if the mystery remains." "You did good, son," Jack said. "You did so good. Now, let's get you something to drink that isn't water from a canteen and maybe some therapy." "So much therapy," Wrath agreed. An hour later, the reckoning. The three architects, former architects, now just three humans who'd accumulated too much power and too much debt, sat at a corner table in Abbott's dining room, drinking coffee and looking diminished. Without their temporal manipulation abilities, they were just people. Old people who'd done terrible things for a long time and were now facing consequences. "So what happens to us?" the woman architect asked. Her name was Victoria. She'd been Victoria for 400 years, though before that she'd been someone else, in a time before names were standardized. "What do you think should happen?" Darling asked, sitting across from them with a plate of pear pie that someone had made during the chaos, probably one of the younger Abbott kids trying to feel useful. "Prison," the younger male architect, David, said flatly. "Trial. Punishment. We manipulated history for centuries. We trapped 13 families. We caused incalculable harm." "Yeah," Darling agreed. "You did. But here's the thing, you did it in timelines that don't exist anymore. The correction rewrote history to what it should have been. Which means your crimes are both absolutely real and completely impossible to prosecute because they technically never happened." "Quantum justice," the older male architect, Samuel, said bitterly. "We're guilty of crimes that don't exist in the official record." "Yep." Darling took a bite of pie. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to work. You're going to spend the rest of your natural, mortal lives helping people. You're going to use your knowledge of what was edited to make sure the correction didn't hurt anyone too badly. You're going to be anchors for the new timeline, living reminders of what not to do, examples of how power corrupts even when the intentions start out noble." "That's not punishment enough," Victoria said. "It's not supposed to be punishment," Darling replied. "It's supposed to be redemption. Which is harder than punishment, takes longer than punishment, and doesn't come with the satisfaction of knowing when you've served your time. You just work. Forever. Until you die. And hope that by the end, you've balanced the scales even a little." The three former architects looked at each other, and something passed between them, acceptance, maybe, or resignation, or the first stirrings of something that might eventually become repentance if they worked at it long enough. "We accept," David said. "Good," Darling said. "Now finish your pie. It's rude to waste food, and we don't tolerate rudeness at Abbotts." Meanwhile, the storage room, Lilith's transformation. Lilith had stopped crying but looked hollowed out, like someone had scooped her insides out and forgotten to refill them with anything substantial. She was mortal now, fully, completely mortal, subject to time's linear progression for the first time in 6,000 years. Bobby sat with her, holding Grace, the backwards aging cat, who was now forward aging again, having resumed normal temporal progression at the moment of correction. "How does it feel?" Bobby asked. "Terrifying," Lilith admitted. "Empty. Like I'm missing a limb I never knew I had. Like I've been speaking a language my whole life and suddenly forgot every word." "That's grief," Bobby said gently. "That's what you edited away for 6,000 years. That's the cost of having loved things, of having existed long enough to lose things, of being alive in any meaningful sense." "It's terrible." "Yeah," Bobby agreed. But it's also proof you're human again. Proof you can feel. Proof you're here, now, in this moment, instead of scattered across all moments simultaneously. Lilith looked at him with eyes that were finally, blessedly finite. What do I do now? I don't know how to be human. I don't know how to live in linear time. I don't know how to. One moment at a time, Bobby said. That's how everyone does it. You just live this moment. And then the next one. And then the next one. And eventually, you've lived a day. And then a week. And then a lifetime. That sounds exhausting. It is, Bobby confirmed. But it's also beautiful. Because every moment matters now. Every choice is real. Every person you meet is finite and precious and won't last forever. Including you. You won't last forever anymore either. I'm going to die, Lilith said, and it sounded like a revelation. Eventually, Bobby agreed. But not today. Today you're alive. And tomorrow you'll be alive. And the day after that. And you get to figure out what being alive means when you can't edit it, can't improve it, can't undo your mistakes. You just get to be human. Lilith started crying again, but this time it was different. Not the overwhelming grief of 6,000 years crashing down at once. Just regular crying. The kind humans do when they're overwhelmed and tired and grateful and terrified all at once. I don't have anywhere to go, she said. No family. No home. No identity in this timeline because I edited myself out of the official record centuries ago. You can stay here, Darling said, appearing in the doorway with more coffee. We've got 14 kids. What's one more person who needs a place to figure herself out? You can work in the restaurant. Earn your keep. Learn how to be human by watching humans be human. Why would you do that? Lilith asked. After everything I did? After all the tests and experiments and... Because you're trying to be better, Darling said simply. And anyone who's trying to be better deserves help. That's the rule. That's always been the rule. Now drink your coffee and let us know if you have any allergies we should know about before we put you on the dinner shift. Late afternoon, debriefing and discoveries. The 13 freed families had been fed, given places to sleep, provided with clothes that didn't look temporal and appropriate, and were being gently introduced to the concept that they were now in 2025 and everything they'd known had been corrected or erased or fundamentally changed. Margaret Chin sat with the Abbotts, looking at once exhausted and electric, free and unmoored. 70 years, she kept saying. 70 years in 2 days. Do you know what that does to a person? To experience the same 48 hours over and over, watching the same murders happen, trying to prevent them, trying to understand them, failing every single time. I can't even imagine, Judy said. Good, Margaret replied. Don't try. But I need to tell you what I learned. What I figured out across all those iterations. She pulled out a notebook, crammed with tiny handwriting, observations, theories, diagrams. The Borden murders weren't random. They were a test case. The architects were trying to figure out if they could create a mystery so perfect, so unsolvable, that it would generate uncertainty forever. And it worked. For 133 years, people have argued about whether Lizzie did it, whether someone else did it, whether it was an accident or premeditated or... But now someone knows, Rath said quietly. Now there's a witness. Now the uncertainty is broken even if the mystery remains. Exactly, Margaret confirmed. You anchored the truth in observation. And that's enough. That's what breaks their power. Not revealing the truth, just knowing it exists. I'm still not telling anyone what I saw, Rath said firmly. I know, Margaret said. And I respect that. Actually, I'm grateful for it. Because if the mystery was solved, then those 70 years I spent trapped would feel wasted. Like I suffered for a mystery that just needed a teenager in a closet to solve it. But you're preserving the mystery while breaking its power. She paused, searching for words. That's kind. Thank you. Rath nodded, looking relieved that someone understood. Chuck had been examining the scrolls he'd brought back from 325 AD, cross-referencing them with the ancient book Bobby had retrieved, finding connections that made his 15-year-old brain hurt. These verses they removed, he said, looking up. They're not just about time manipulation or Lilith or any of that. They're about choice. About free will. About the idea that reality isn't fixed, that history isn't predetermined, that every person has the power to change things. That's what they were really trying to hide, not specific information, but the concept that change is possible. So by removing the verses, they made people believe they couldn't change anything, Maxine said, following the logic. Made people passive. Made them accept reality as it was because they thought it was inevitable. Exactly, Chuck confirmed. It's the ultimate control mechanism, not forcing people to obey, but making them believe obedience is the only option. That's some diabolical shit, she said. That's power, Samuel, the older former architect, said from across the room, where he'd been listening. Real power isn't forcing people to do what you want. It's making them want what you want them to want. It's editing the framework within which they make choices so that even their rebellion serves your purposes. And you're telling us this why? Maxine asked suspiciously. Because I don't want that power anymore, Samuel said. Because I've spent 400 years controlling reality, and I'm exhausted, and I want to know what it feels like to just live. To make choices that matter because they can't be undone. To fail and have the failure mean something. He looked at the Abbotts. You people are insane. You have 14 children, 15 if you count Lilith now, in a world that barely makes sense, and you just keep going. Keep loving each other. Keep fighting for each other. Keep refusing to give up even when giving up is the logical choice. That's not power. That's something better. That's family, Jack said simply. That's family. Which is harder than power, more complicated than power, and infinitely more worth it. Evening, the Medal of Honor and the something borrowed, something blue. As the sun set over the city, over the restaurant, over a reality that had been fundamentally rearranged but was still recognizably itself, the Abbotts gathered in the dining room for something that felt suspiciously like a celebration. Darling had made a massive pot of what she called cauliflower surprise. The surprise was that it was mostly not cauliflower, but nobody questioned her cooking anymore. And someone had contributed corn kernels and other vegetables until it became a stew that could feed approximately 40 people, which was good because they had approximately 40 people to feed. Barney stood up, cleared his throat, and pulled something from his pocket, a small box that looked ancient and important. Before I was lobotomized, he said, before I became the janitor you all knew, I was awarded this. He opened the box to reveal a Medal of Honor, tarnished with age but still recognizable. For service in Korea. For saving my unit when we were ambushed. For doing something brave when being brave was the only option. The room went silent. I forgot I had this, Barney continued. Forgot I earned it. Forgot what it meant. But today, witnessing what you all did, watching you risk everything to save 13 families and free Lilith and trigger a cosmic correction, I remembered. And I wanted you to know that what you did today deserves a medal too. Deserves recognition. Deserves. He choked up, couldn't continue. Jack stood up, walked over, and hugged him. Thank you, Barney. Dr. Henderson. Bernard. Whoever you are, whoever you were, whoever you're becoming, thank you for waiting 50 years to help us. Thank you for building devices from walkie-talkies and GPS units. Thank you for being the kind of person who earns medals and then forgets about them because the work was more important than the recognition. The room erupted in applause, sloppy, emotional, the kind of applause that's more about expressing feelings than appreciating performance. When it died down, Margaret Chen stood up. I don't have a medal, she said. But I have something else. Something I've been carrying for 70 subjective years. waiting for the right moment to give it away. She pulled out a small box from her period. These were my grandmother's, Margaret said. She wore them when she immigrated to America in 1867. Wore them when she started her business. Wore them when she got married. Wore them through joy and tragedy and everything between. And now I'm giving them to Judy because you saved me. You came back. You didn't have to, but you did. And that's the kind of heroism that deserves something borrowed, something blue. Judy accepted the earrings with tears streaming down her face, and the two of them hugged, two teenage girls separated by 133 years, brought together by impossible circumstances and mutual rescue. Everything will work itself out, Margaret whispered, echoing Darling's words from earlier. Everything will be okay. I know, because I spent 70 years watching things not work out, watching things not be okay. So now that they are, I can actually believe it. Late night, private conversations and revelations. After dinner, after the celebrations, after most people had found places to sleep or were being set up in temporary housing that Barney was arranging through mysterious channels, probably involving his temporal physics credentials and some very confused government officials, the core Abbott family gathered in the storage room. Just the 16 of them now, 14 kids, 2 parents, no longer counting Lilith because she'd gone to sleep in the office, exhausted from her first day as a mortal. We did it, Maxine said, still not quite believing. We actually did it. We saved everyone. We triggered the correction. We broke the architect's power. We got lucky, Wrath interrupted. We should be dead. Should have scattered across time. Should have destroyed reality completely. We survived because he paused. Why did we survive, actually? Bobby, who'd been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Because we're not special. That's the secret. The 13 families before us failed because they thought they were chosen, thought they were heroes, thought they were different from everyone else. But we're not different. We're just a family. A weird, chaotic, too many kids family that runs a restaurant and loves each other despite everything. And that ordinariness, that refusal to see ourselves as special, that's what kept us grounded. That's very zen, Judy said. That's very true, Jack corrected. He looked at his children, all 14 of them, plus technically Lilith sleeping in the office, plus the 13 freed families they'd rescued, plus Margaret Chin, who was probably having very confused dreams about timelines, and felt something settle in his chest. Not satisfaction. Not completion. Just continuity. The sense that they'd done something right, something good, something that his father would never have done, and that made all the difference. Your grandfather, he said suddenly, would have hated this. Would have hated that we risked everything for strangers. Would have said we should have taken the architect's offer, saved ourselves, lived comfortably in a pocket timeline. Would have called us trailer trash for making the hard choice instead of the easy one. Good, Maxine said. Fuck grandfather. Language, Darling said automatically, then, but yes, fuck him. He was wrong about everything. Wrong about you, Jack. Wrong about what makes a person worthy. Wrong about what strength looks like. He had cauliflower ear from all the fights he picked, Jack said, remembering. Used to show it off like a badge of honor. Like being violent made him important. Like causing pain made him powerful. He looked at his children. You know what makes you powerful? Being kind when kindness is hard. Being brave when being brave means being scared. Being human when being human means being vulnerable. That's good, Chuck said. Can I use that in my college essay when I apply in a few years? You can use it in your wedding vows for all I care, Jack said, laughing. Just remember it. Remember that we had the power to control time, to edit reality, to become exactly what the architects were, and we chose not to. We chose family. We chose messy, complicated, unedited reality. And that choice matters. Wrath, who'd been sitting silently since the debriefing, finally spoke up. I need to tell someone. Not what I saw, I'm still not telling that. But I need to tell someone that it matters. That witnessing mattered. That being in that closet, hearing those muffled sounds, seeing that he stopped, breathing hard. I keep thinking about crayons. Crayons? Bobby asked gently. Yeah, crayons. Because when I was a kid, when we were all kids, we used to color. And Mom would tell us to stay inside the lines, but also that it was okay if we didn't, that the picture was ours to make however we wanted. And I keep thinking about that. About how reality is like a coloring book. There are lines, suggested shapes, expected outcomes. But we can color outside them. We can make it ours. We can. He was crying now, the kind of crying that comes from deep trauma being processed in real time. Darling pulled him close, held him while he sobbed, while the rest of the family formed a protective circle around them. You witnessed, she said quietly. You held the truth even when holding it hurt. You did what needed to be done. And now you get to carry it. And we'll help you carry it. Because that's what family does. We share the weight. Even when the weight is knowing something terrible? Rath asked. Especially then, Darling confirmed. Midnight, the final piece. Everyone was asleep or heading towards sleep when Johnny went into labor. Except it wasn't labor in the traditional sense, it was the final delivery of information, the last pieces of data about the correction, about what had changed, about what reality now looked like versus what it had looked like before. Darling and Jack rushed to the office where Johnny was sitting, concentrating, as papers materialized around her faster than before, as information poured out in a final flood. Almost done, Johnny gasped. Almost there. The last document appeared, and Johnny's stomach deflated, not dramatically, not like an actual pregnancy ending, but like a balloon slowly releasing air until it returned to normal. It's done, she said, breathing hard. I delivered everything. Every piece of information about the correction, about the changes, about... She picked up the final document, read it, and her eyes went wide. Oh. Oh wow. What? Jack demanded. Johnny held up the paper so they could see. Final correction report. Major changes. The Magna Carta was signed 3 decades earlier, leading to accelerated democratic movements. The Industrial Revolution began with better worker protections, reducing child labor by 40%. Several wars were shortened due to diplomatic solutions that weren't previously pursued. The 1918 flu pandemic killed 30% fewer people due to earlier medical advances. The civil rights movement gained momentum faster due to earlier legal precedents. Climate change is 15 years less advanced due to earlier environmental awareness. Abbott's restaurant never struck oil. Instead, it was founded by Darling's grandfather using money earned from honest labor. The family is marginally less wealthy but infinitely more respected. We're not oil money anymore, Darling said slowly. We're just regular restaurant money, Jack added. Is that better or worse? Darling asked. Better, Jack decided. Definitely better. No more jokes about being nouveau riche trailer trash who got lucky. We're just people who work hard. Also, Johnny continued, reading further, several of the Abbott children have slightly different lives now. Maxine and Rath are still twins, but everyone knows it now because the correction made it more obvious. Chuck is apparently really good at piano in this timeline. Bobby is exactly the same because he's already been temporally displaced, so he exists outside the correction's full effects. And there are 14 of us instead of 15 because... She stopped. Because what? Darling asked. Because I was supposed to be twins too, Johnny said quietly. I was supposed to have a sister. But she died in childbirth in the original timeline. In this corrected timeline, I lived and she lived. I have a twin. Her name is... A knock on the door interrupted her. Everyone froze. The knock came again, patient but insistent. Jack opened the door to find a young woman standing there, early 20s, pregnant, actually pregnant this time, with eyes that were eerily familiar. Hi, the woman said. I'm Julie. Julie Abbott, Johnny's twin. And also, she gestured at her obviously pregnant stomach. I'm apparently about to make you grandparents? The correction gave me a whole new life. A husband. A baby on the way. Memories of growing up alongside Johnny, even though those memories didn't exist until an hour ago. So I guess I'm here to introduce myself? And also to ask if anyone has any ideas about baby names, because my husband and I cannot agree on anything. The office went silent. Then Darling started laughing, the kind of laughter that comes from being so overwhelmed that the only response is absurdity. We have 15 kids, she said. We have 15 kids now. The correction gave us another daughter. Plus, we're about to be grandparents. Plus, we've adopted Lilith, who used to be an immortal temporal manipulator. Plus, we're housing 13 refugee families from various points in history. Plus, we just rewrote 6,000 years of reality. Plus. She couldn't continue. Just laughed until she cried, until Jack started laughing too, until all the kids joined in, until even Julie, who existed now but hadn't existed an hour ago, was laughing at the sheer impossibility of the Abbott family and everything they'd become. 15, Jack said when he could finally speak. 15 kids. My father said I'd never amount to anything, and I have 15 kids and a restaurant and a family that just saved reality. I think I amounted to something. You amounted to everything, Darling corrected. Now, let's figure out where Julie is going to sleep and whether we need to build an addition to the apartment upstairs, and how exactly we explain to people that we suddenly have a daughter who's older than most of our other kids. We don't explain, Maxine said. We just introduce her and act like she's always been here. Let people figure it out themselves. That's terrible logic, Rath said. That's Abbott logic, everyone replied in unison. Dawn, August 5th, 2025, definitely August 5th now, the correction had settled that much. The sun rose over Abbott's restaurant, over a city that was the same but different, over a reality that had been fundamentally rearranged but was still recognizably itself. Inside, the Abbott family, all 15 kids, 2 parents, 1 reawakened physicist, 1 backwards then forwards aging cat, 1 former immortal learning to be mortal, and 13 refugees from time plus their various family members, prepared for the day ahead. The restaurant would open. Customers would come. Life would continue. But underneath, everything was different. The architects were powerless. The 13 families were free. 6,000 years of temporal manipulation had been corrected. And 1 family, 1 ordinary, extraordinary, impossible Abbott family, had done what no one else had managed. They'd looked at power and chosen love. They'd faced the choice between saving themselves and saving everyone, and they'd refused the binary, found the third option, done both. Rath stood at the top of the stairs leading to the storage room, looking at the space where the wax cube had been. It had dissolved completely during the correction, leaving only a faint chartreuse glow on the concrete. He still carried what he'd witnessed in 1892. Still heard the muffled sounds. Still saw what he'd seen through the crack in the closet door. Still knew the truth about the Borden murders. And he would carry it forever. Would never tell anyone. Would let the mystery remain a mystery while knowing that underneath, there was truth. There was certainty. There was what actually happened, witnessed but not revealed, known but not shared. You okay? Judy asked, coming up behind him. No, Rath said honestly. But I will be. Eventually. Maybe. Ask me again in a few years and see if the nightmares have stopped. The love that dare not speak its name, Judy said cryptically. What? That's what I was thinking about. Oscar Wilde. That phrase. Everyone thinks it means homosexual love because that's how it got used. But originally, it meant something else. Meant love so profound that language fails, that words can't capture. And I think that's what you're carrying. A truth so profound that speaking it would diminish it. So you carry it silently. You love the truth enough to let it stay private. Rath considered this. That's either very deep or complete bullshit. Can be both, Judy said, smiling. Abbott family specialty, being profound and ridiculous simultaneously. They stood together, looking at where impossible things had happened, where frogs had become wax, where their family had faced down eternity and somehow won. "We're going to be okay," Wrath said, and it wasn't a question. "We're going to be okay," Judy confirmed. "Everything will work itself out. Everything will be okay." "You sound like Mom." "I am my mother's daughter. Also my father's daughter. Also my own person. Also part of something bigger than myself. Also," she paused, "I need coffee. My existentialism." "We're going to be okay," Wrath said, and it wasn't a question. "We're going to be okay," Judy confirmed. "Everything will work itself out. Everything will be okay." "You sound like Mom." "I am my mother's daughter. Also my father's daughter. Also my own person. Also part of something bigger than myself. Also," she paused, "I need coffee. My existentialism is getting out of hand." They went downstairs together, back to the kitchen where Darling was making breakfast for approximately 40 people. Somehow she always had enough food. It was one of the inexplicable miracles of the Abbott household, where Jack was drinking coffee and looking at his family with the kind of love that transcends language, where 15 kids were arguing and laughing and existing in all their messy glory, where Lilith sat at the counter, drinking tea and watching humans be human with the fascination of someone seeing it all for the first time, where Barney and Grace, the cat, were planning something involving temporal physics and probably shouldn't be left unsupervised, but probably would be anyway because that was the Abbott way, where Margaret Chin was teaching some of the younger Abbott kids phrases in Chinese, creating connections across time and culture, where the 13 freed families were slowly adjusting to a world that had changed while they were trapped, finding their footing in a reality that was more just, more kind, more possible than the one they'd left, where everything was different and nothing had changed and both were true simultaneously. Bobby stood at the window, looking out at the city, at the sunrise, at the beginning of a new day, in a corrected reality. "It's going to be interesting," he said to no one in particular. "The next few years. Watching how the changes ripple out. Seeing what's better and what's worse and what's just different." "You worried?" Chuck asked, appearing beside him. "No," Bobby said. "Just observant. I saw 100 timelines. Some were better than this. Some were worse. But this one is ours. We chose it. We fought for it. We made it possible. And that matters more than whether it's perfect." "Nothing's perfect," Chuck agreed. "But some things are true," Bobby countered. "And truth is better than perfection." Outside, the first customers of the day approached Abbott's restaurant, unaware that they were walking into a place that had recently been the epicenter of a cosmic correction, a family that had rewritten 6,000 years of reality. A moment in history that would never be fully documented, but would ripple forward forever. The door opened. "Welcome to Abbotts," Darling called out, her voice steady and warm and utterly normal despite everything. "Sit wherever you like. Coffee's fresh. And the special today is something we call cosmic correction stew. It's got cauliflower, corn kernels, and a whole lot of other stuff that shouldn't work together, but somehow does. Kind of like our family. Kind of like reality. Kind of like everything." The customers sat down, ordered, ate. And the Abbott family served them. And life continued. And somewhere, across time and space, in dimensions that existed in the gaps between moments, the universe took a breath and decided that maybe, just maybe, this particular family had earned a break. At least until the next impossible thing happened. Which, knowing the Abbotts, would probably be by Thursday. End of chapter 4. Complete manuscript so far. Greased